Truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
For GB News to win at the Trick Awards for the 3rd year in a row.
So thank you so much for voting for us.
First, and hopefully there'll be a few more to come down the line.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's because of you that we're proud to be the People's Channel. It's because of you that we are Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer says he deeply regrets his Islands of Strangers immigration speech, saying, "I wouldn't have used those words if I'd known they were, or even would be interpreted as, an echo of Enoch Powell."
What a thing to say, eh? And that's not the only government U-turn today, as the Prime Minister is left scarred and rudderless as he agrees existing disability claimants can keep their benefits, costing $3 billion to the taxpayer.
And it's a migrant swap. Yes, Britain and France are negotiating a new deal to exchange Channel migrants for asylum seekers in a one-in, one-out policy. But could this possibly stop the boats?
And Marcos Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute samurai sword rampage in Hainault.
Well, we've been hearing victim impact statements read out in court, including from Daniel Angerin's father, who spoke of the absolutely heartbreaking moments where he discovered his young son lying dead in the street.
Elsewhere, Conservative MPs are calling for an outright ban on smartphones in schools after admitting guidance issued under the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak simply hasn't worked.
And is it shoplifting? Is it graffiti? Is it playing music out loud on the bus? Stay tuned to find out what pet peeves or crimes Brits care most about.
And the grandfather of the new head of MI6 was a spy for the Nazis. Yes, new news out today shows he was known as the Butcher. Does our Prime Minister believe anything at all?
I don't think so. You know, if I've got these principles, I've also got these others, if you don't like them.
And I suppose it's completely fine to be a politician who doesn't believe in anything if you have a programme for government, at the very least. The problem is, it's not that he doesn't believe anything and is sort of picking one lane and going down that for expediency. It's he's veering from one lane to the other constantly, week after week. It's a different Prime Minister saying a different thing. Islands of Strangers, oh, I'm so sorry, that was a little bit racist. I'm going to cut these benefits. Now I'm not going to cut these benefits. I mean, what does this man actually think?
I'm not sure he actually has any kind of overriding principle driving him, or even an ideology driving him. It's absolutely absurd. I think he tried to sound a bit, you know, down with the public with those comments. I understand people are worried about immigration. I understand your concerns about integration and the future of this country. But, and a few left-wingers get a bit upset with him, and he's forced to backtrack.
I mean, it is utterly extraordinary.
It's embarrassing.
Because Enoch Powell never said the words Islands of Strangers. He said the word strangers, not islands of strangers. I mean, it's not even a quote. It's an allusion at the very most. I mean, you really have to be trying to find something Powellian about what Keir Starmer said in order to create this comparison. I mean, it's a complete fabrication.
He's apologising for other people's interpretation of words that he said and didn't even write himself, although he should have read them really in advance from his speechwriter. And a Prime Minister looks rather weak, don't you think, if they're apologising for how someone else interprets their words wrongly?
It's nonsense, isn't it? I'm sure we could find hundreds and thousands of words that Enoch Powell said. Should we strike them all off the acceptable, agreeable political lexicon? I mean, shall we just? I mean, if Enoch Powell said something about fish fingers, Are we not allowed to talk about fish? I don't know why.
Absolutely
I
not.
don't know why I'm talking about fish. Maybe I just want some.
You
fish
mentioned
fingers.
fish fingers earlier, actually, before the show.
It's on my mind. It's on my mind.
It's on your mind, isn't it? But yeah, let us know. I mean, what does this say about Keir Starmer, really? That he's backtracked on these simple words that he said in a speech that was supposed to show the public that he understood their concerns on immigration. I mean, seriously, gbnews.com/you'll say, get in touch, please do. It's Friday, why not? But let's get the headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. Very good afternoon. It's just gone midday. These are your latest headlines. The Prime Minister has bowed to pressure from the Labour rebels with major concessions announced on welfare reforms. Current recipients of PIP and universal credit with health conditions will now keep their payments in a move described by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values.
The government's been really listening to Labour MPs and is going to protect people who are currently in receipt of personal independence payments so that it won't decrease. And also people who receive the health element of universal credit, that will also be protected. So, you know, in line with Labour values, it's about protecting the most vulnerable. But I would say all of us want to see people in work who can be in work and want to work. And we're very committed to this bill, which promotes movement into work. But these changes are really critical to protecting the most vulnerable.
Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall confirmed the changes in a letter to MPs following days of crisis talks. And it seems she is optimistic that the bill will pass on Tuesday.
I really believe these are positive changes. We've worked hard to get agreement on this. There's really, really strong commitment to the principles of reforming our welfare state. Those who can work should get help, and we have the biggest ever investment into employment support for sick and disabled people, but also to protect those who can never work, make sure their incomes are protected and make sure they're never reassessed again.
In the last hour, we've learnt that Habibur Massoum has been found guilty of murdering his wife by stabbing her to death as she pushed their baby in a pram. Convicted this morning at Bradford Crown Court, the 26-year-old was described as a violent, jealous and controlling husband who murdered his wife after tracking her to a women's refuge centre. Massoum launched the ferocious knife attack in broad daylight before leaving her to bleed to death, calmly walking away, leaving their 7-month-old son behind. Some other breaking news from this morning. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of terrorism after planes were vandalised at RAF Brize Norton. It follows an incursion claimed by Palestine Action, the protest group which is about to be banned by the Home Secretary. Counter-terror police say 2 men and a woman were detained after last week's attack, which saw red paint sprayed into a jet engine of a military aircraft. A 4th person, a 41-year-old woman, was arrested for assisting an officer. An offender supporting the group will soon become a criminal offence punishable by up to 14 years in prison. And in a major shift, France has agreed to take back some Channel migrants under a new one-in, one-out pilot scheme with the UK. Under the plan, every illegal migrant arriving in Britain will be returned to France within a matter of weeks. It's the first deal of its kind aimed at stopping repeat crossings and hitting people smuggling gangs. The Home Secretary is expected to unveil the policy next week ahead of the President Macron's state visit to London. GBNews spoke to Shadow Paymaster General Richard Holden earlier to hear his doubts.
It's going to actually increase the number of people crossing the Channel, and it's going to be sort of weird merry-go-round in the middle of the English Channel as we have people coming on one side and then shifting them back just for others to come on the reverse again. It's completely ridiculous. What we should have is a proper deterrent, like we had with the Rwanda scheme, which said if you come here illegally, you do not get to stay in the UK.
No time to fear. That's how Inspector Malloy Campbell described the moment he ran towards a sword-wielding attacker in a desperate bid to save lives. Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault. The dual Spanish-Brazilian national has also been convicted of attempted murder, GBH, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon. Officers say more lives wouldn't have been lost if police didn't act the way they did. A British man has been charged in the US for leading a worldwide hacking operation that caused more than £18 million in damages. 25-year-old Kai West was arrested in France earlier this year, and he's now facing extradition. He's accused of stealing and selling sensitive data under the online name Intel Broker. If found guilty, West could face up to 20 years in prison, as the FBI says this was a years-long scheme that targeted over 40 victims and generated millions in illicit funds. And the iconic Glastonbury Festival is back with a star-studded lineup this year. Rod Stewart takes the legend slot, while the 1975, Neil Young and the Chrome Hearts and Olivia Rodrigo headlined the Pyramid stage. Meanwhile, the BBC has confirmed that it will not show Neil Young's headline set at the artist's request. But festival goers will need to keep their wits about them, as a second amber heat health alert has been issued for southern and eastern England this weekend. Temperatures are expected to pass 30 degrees from today through until Tuesday, with health officials urging caution as the heatwave continues. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now, but let's have a quick look at the markets.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.374 and 1.173 euros. The price of gold is £2,392 and 72 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,774 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 minutes past midday. Now the Prime Minister has bowed down to Labour rebels as the government announces major concessions to the welfare bill.
Yes, so Sir Keir Starmer has agreed for PIP payments to continue for current claimants and for universal credit recipients with health issues.
Well, the Institute for Fiscal Studies said this could cost the taxpayer up to £3 billion more than was previously expected.
Yeah, quite an expensive U-turn. A crunch vote will now take place on Tuesday, giving MPs the first chance to officially support or reject it.
Well, we're joined now by the former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards and the former Conservative MP Alexander Stafford. Paul, we're going to start with you. It's a bit of a humiliating climb down for the Prime Minister.
Well, you say humiliating climb down. I say he's just been listening to the voices of his mainstream Labour MPs who know full well that this policy was not very well designed, hadn't included some of the people most affected and didn't listen to their voices either, and is now going to go back to the drawing board and come up with something that doesn't scare people and doesn't punish people. And so the big objective, and I'm sure we all agree with this, is that we have to reform the benefit system, which is horribly broken. But this is obviously not the way to do it.
OK, well, Alexander Stafford, former Conservative MP, should the Prime Minister have thought a little more about the bill before putting it out there?
Well, this is deeply embarrassing for Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. He has a huge majority of the Commons. He can't get through one of his flagship policies without backtracking. And for once, the Labour backbench MPs have got some backbone. I think they've seen what happened with the winter fuel allowance cut. They've seen what's happened with the farmers. And they suddenly realised, oh, dear, we're going to lose the next general election. We need to show some stick. And Keir Starmer can't face down his own troops. And in fact, the rebellion seems to be growing and growing every single day. And this is deeply embarrassing, but also deeply dangerous for the UK's economy.
I suppose one of the big things about this is not just this specific bill, but what it says about the Prime Minister's authority on a whole host of issues. Paul Richards, does the Prime Minister have the authority now to follow through with other controversial areas of policy, whether it's planning reform or anything else?
Keir Starmer has an enormous well of goodwill in the Parliamentary Labour Party, and don't forget, most of the MPs
Where's the evidence for that, Paul? Where's the evidence for that? You've got over 120 MPs willing to vote down this bill, which some have said would lead to a vote of no confidence.
Well, because it was specifically to do with this particular policy, which, as I described earlier, had not been thought through and wasn't going to work. But the
are you
goodwill
sure about that, Paul? Sorry to interrupt. But are you sure about that, though? Because they're looking at the polls, aren't they? They're looking at the polls and they're worrying about reform in their seats or other parties taking away their jobs at the next election. Surely that is the context that's missing here.
That there is a goodwill for him because most of them do owe their seats to his election. They came in on his coattails in the last election, and they were selected in his mould. These are people who were sort of selected to be Labour candidates because they were in the mainstream. We eradicated the Corbynite ideas from our party, and those people are not there now. A few are residually. But it was the mainstream of the party that caused this reversal because these are people who are sensible and mainstream. So it's not there's no bigger malaise here, and there's certainly no suggestion of a Boris-like swap where you just swap the leader, and even though they've just won an election, which the Tories rue, I think, and probably we've learned from.
OK, Alexander Stafford, you're shaking your head there.
This is absolute crazy talk. He's completely lost any authority amongst his own parliamentarians. He won less than a year ago, 11 months ago, he won a supermajority. He can't get through flagship policy. Got to remember, although the Labour majority is huge, a lot of the Labour MPs got their seats by only a small margin, and they're realising, actually, they didn't want Starmer in the first place. They won because, frankly, the Conservatives, and I was part of that government, we made a mess of things at the end. They got elected almost by default, and now they're realising the public have turned against them. They're doing policy after policy that's deeply unpopular. And worse, it's punishing some of the most vulnerable people in society. Look at what they did to the old age pensioners. Look what they're doing about farmers. And now they're going after disabled people. They realise, Labour Party realise, their leadership is not looking after the public and actually turning the public against them. So they're desperate to try and show that Keir Starmer has no authority and no moral imperative.
OK, well, Paul, it's not the only U-turn of the day, is it? The welfare bill. There's been another extraordinary U-turn, or at least a backtracking. Keir Starmer now does not stand by his comments about an island of strangers. This was a warning that if immigration stays as high as it is, we'll all be living in an island of strangers, or could be. I think we've got the clip just to remind ourselves.
This is what he said on the 12th of May. This was only 6 or so weeks ago. Big speech on immigration. Let's listen to those words when the Prime Minister said, we don't want to risk becoming an island of strangers.
We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower-paid workers rather...
Well, a lot of people said that was similar to words used by Enoch Powell. I don't quite see the comparison myself, but now in an interview today, the Prime Minister says that he deeply regrets making that speech. Paul Richards, this is U-turn after U-turn.
Well, the sentiment he was getting across was that since Boris allowed the sort of Boris surge of immigration post-Brexit, a lot of people have been concerned about immigration, and that's a reasonable concern. What he's saying in his interview today was that the choice of words, the island of strangers quote, was misinterpreted. And I've been through Enoch Powell's speeches as well, by the way, Tom, and I can see no evidence of Enoch Powell ever saying that phrase. And if we are in the business of picking out odd words, then we are in trouble, aren't we? But I think
why is he apologising then, Paul? Why is he apologising then? I think
the point he was making was that some people felt it was in some way Powellian, and that's a reasonable call.
What?
But I mean, the speechwriter didn't think. I'm a speechwriter. You use words. Sometimes there are vague echoes of other speeches in your head. Every poet is a thief, but it was not a straight quote from Enoch Powell by any stretch of the imagination. And maybe he should have chosen different words. He's chosen to apologise for this because it has obviously caused a lot of a row, particularly inside the Labour Party. But there we are.
It is strange, isn't it, Alexander? I mean, you were a Member of Parliament under Boris Johnson. Do you see some sort of echoes, perhaps? Because there was a period in sort of late 2021, early 2022, when the Prime Minister was just U-turning almost every week, sending ministers out to say one line in the morning and it changed by the afternoon. I mean, we're not quite at that stage with this government, but perhaps we're not far off it.
We are almost. Got one big difference, though, between there is at that point, the Conservatives have been in power for 12, 13 years. This is 11 months into a new government with a supermajority. Inevitably, when you're in power for a long, long time, you get more and more disagreements. And we're not. But Labour are only on for a short period of time. Now, let's be honest about why Keir Starmer's U-turns on his Island of Strangers comments. It's because over the last 6 weeks, the amount of illegal immigrants coming here on small boats has skyrocketed. He clearly set out that speech to say we're going to do something about illegal immigration, we're going to smash the gangs, stop the boats, and he is failed. And the numbers are going through the roof over the last 6 weeks. And he's realised he's had to sort of backtrack because otherwise he'll look even more a failure when the latest numbers come in again. This is a result of his absolute failure last 6 weeks on immigration.
That's an interesting assessment. Yes, if he says that we could become an island of strangers and immigration shows no signs of being curbed, then he's in a sticky position, isn't he, Paul?
Well, we're closing the hotels. We're going to have this system where we can drag the boats back to France.
We're not closing the hotels, though, are we? We're buying them up.
When Macron is here. We're going to disrupt the gang's business model as a result, and that will get the illegal crossings down. But the big surge of legal migration happened on the Conservatives' watch, didn't it?
That's true.
That was when the big numbers came in under Boris.
Well, I think perhaps that's a good time to leave this conversation. I'm sure that there will be more conversations like this over the course of the next 11 months, perhaps. But what a time to find ourselves in. A big thank you to Paul Richards and Alexander Stafford for that. It wasn't really a debate, more a discussion.
Yeah,
sorry, good nature.
Sorry I was interrupting Paul Richards so much there. He was just, he just says things and then I just want to immediately rebut them. But there you go, Paul Richards, good show, and Alexander Stafford. OK, well, in other news, Sir Keir Starmer is in talks with France to return channel migrants in a one-in, one-out system.
Well, in the scheme, Britain would send migrants back to France within weeks of their arrival, and in return, the UK would take asylum seekers from France. So one in, one out.
OK, well, Home Office sources indicated the scheme is a work in progress, with hopes of an announcement of an agreement in principle, and hope that can happen soon.
Well, let's get more on this now with the immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. Harjap, I suppose there is a principle here that might be quite hard for a lot of people to sort of internalise and understand. How does this get numbers down if, for every one person we send back, we get another person coming forward?
I think people are right to think that, and I was thinking exactly the same thing, to be fair. But what the actual nitty-gritty of the deal is, if we look into it, we're going to be allowing people from France to come here who would have a right to come here anyway under the family reunification rules. So that's family members of people already being granted residency here or asylum seekers here. But in return for that, we'll be sending the people crossing the channel back. So it's more of a case of something better than nothing. It's a hope that it will deter the gangs from sending people here, because people might have in the back of their minds, well, I could be sent to France immediately as soon as I land because of this deal. It technically won't really get numbers. It might get numbers down in the fact that we might have had people crossing the channel anyway, and we would have had to take the reunification people anyway in that aspect. But if we're looking at, will it deter channel crossings? Until this deal comes in, we're not really going to know. Is it going to act as a deterrent? We don't know. What's to prevent people from, as soon as they get to France, trying again, coming back again? Is it going to stop the gangs? It's reaching, I would say, initially here. And until we actually see it in action, we won't know. Are gangs going to be deterred from it? If people are not deterred by the fear of drowning or boat capsizing or dying at sea, then is this really going to deter people? That's the premise it's going to work. Deterrent schemes don't really work. We've seen that before.
It's tricky as well to sell to the public, because I would guess that a lot of people don't want one in, regardless of whether there's one out, if you see what I mean, Harjap.
Yeah, well, this is what Smash the Gangs was about, isn't it? It's about stopping people coming in illegally per se. Not in a barter deal. I suppose the way Keir Starmer's going around it, he's thinking, well, hold on, I'm going to try and grab everything I can in order to see if it works. That includes deals with the EU, throwing money into task forces, trying to patrol the beaches. So he's got to do something, because this is a thorn in Labour's side, because the optics look totally bad on it.
Well, if it is tightly implemented, I can see this actually having a huge impact. Because if you're going to get on a boat and you know that you will be sent back to France, even you don't mind if someone else is going to be sent across to the UK. You're caring about yourself. The reason you get in a boat is you want to come to the UK. And if we're saying everyone in that boat is going back to France, oh, fine, we'll take some people elsewhere to come to the UK. I mean, suddenly the boats dry up, I suppose, is the logic, because people in those boats know they're not coming to the UK. I suppose the devil is in the detail, though, because we don't yet have commitments that 100% of the people in the boats will be sent back to France. I can see this 100% working if 100% of those people were immediately returned to France. But that doesn't look like it's the precise detail of the deal.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think what happens is, if suddenly, say within the next 2 months, every single person who crossed the channel was sent back, that might send something out, a message to the gangs, and people will think twice as opposed to it. But it would have to be every single person. If it's 50%, people would still take them odds. They're probably the best odds they've had. They took worse odds when crossing other borders elsewhere in other countries, and fleeing their homes from war-torn countries.
And also, let's be honest, some people want to cross illegally for a reason. For example, they want to be involved in the black economy. They want to live in Britain illegally. Not everyone crossing the channel wants to even get asylum in this country necessarily on those terms. And of course, there are other ways of getting here illegally anyway.
Well, yeah, before the small boats were highlighted, the traditional route was through the lorries. And like when I first started my job in the 2000s, then the majority of people used to come via lorries, and they used to get detected at Dover if the lorry was detected, or if not, they used to just assimilate into here, into the public and into Britain.
And now if you drive to Calais and you take the Eurotunnel and you see just the enormous amount of infrastructure, I mean, tens of millions of pounds of British taxpayers' money has gone to building what is essentially a fortress around the lorry parks in Calais. It is the most extraordinary sight to drive through. But Harjap Singh Bangal, thanks so much for explaining what is a tentative deal between us and the French.
Yes, well, let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Is a one-in, one-out scheme the solution to all of this? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up.
Yes, a GB News exclusive. Blackout Britain. The country could face 2-week power outages as a result of the country's dash towards net zero.
But after the break, Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute samurai sword rampage in Hainault.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show. It's not a bad brand. Yeah. Uncensored. Very, very racy tonight on the unpredictable. What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Good Afternoon Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Good Afternoon Britain. A cheerful lollipop man's signature high fives have been stopped in their tracks.
Oh dear. Well, Neil Cotton, believed by local children... sorry. I'll start that all over again. This is a chap called Neil Cotton, and he's beloved by local kids in Howden, East Yorkshire. And he's been told by the council to stop the friendly high-fiving gesture, all in the name of health and safety.
But many parents and motorists are calling it nonsense. No surprises there. So apparently this chap, 57 years old, he spent the last 2 years brightening up the school run in the East Yorkshire town of Howden. There he is, looks like a nice guy, doesn't he? He has a cheerful attitude. He has his signature high fives. The children love it, the parents love it, he loves it. But no, the council says, get on with your job and stop the high fives.
This is the one area of employment where the council's trying to chivvy people on and get them to work harder rather than less hard. But I mean, what have we done in this country where we've sort of abandoned our sense of whimsy? I think adding a sense of whimsy to all jobs, I think, is a fundamental productivity measure, actually. I think if you're enjoying what you're doing, you're going to be doing it better. People are going to go into school or away from school with a smile on their face. What a joyful thing in a town in Yorkshire. I mean, amazing, brilliant. And yet, no, of course, the clipboards have to come out and the dour library monitor style individuals. I bet they're all library monitors at school. They've just got to tell people that they can't have fun.
Yeah, so the children have to be shooed along. They can't be distracted by such frivolities as a high five.
GB News, the People's Channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. At 28 minutes past midday, we can go live straight to Downing Street, where Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, has just left a briefing. Catherine, what can you tell us?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, it's been a pretty torrid week for the government. They think that they've now made sufficient concessions to get this welfare vote over the line on Tuesday. But look, how on earth did they let it get to this point? I mean, it's just under a year since Sir Keir Starmer walked up this street with a massive majority, promising change, and a year on, they've got themselves in a situation where they've had to U-turn 3 times just in recent weeks. So a question was asked about this and said, isn't there a risk that the public will think that the Prime Minister basically doesn't stand for anything? And the Prime Minister's official spokesman said, no, this is a government that listens and that they are focused on delivering for working people. We asked too, obviously, now these changes have been made, the government is not going to save as much money as they thought. That's going to create problems for Rachel Reeves. We're told there will be no increase in borrowing to fund this, but they haven't said how they're going to pay for it. Tax rises have not been ruled out. We're told this will all be set out in the budget in the autumn, and allegations too of a 2-tier system in that people who are already getting the personal independence payments are safe from these changes, but people getting them in the future, that will be a different decision. That was sort of swatted away. And then finally on the boats, the one in, one out, it sounds like that is going to happen. We don't know exactly when, possibly when Macron comes over. But I suggested that was this proof that the Prime Minister finally realises that they can't succeed without a deterrent. They said that they didn't accept that a deterrent will be a working asylum system with faster processing, etc. But no sign of that as yet.
Very interesting. We await Emmanuel Macron's visit for those details. Catherine, I wonder if we can just take you full frame just for a second, because while you were speaking, we can see a very sleepy Larry the cat just to your left there on the road. And I wondered if he was just enjoying the sunshine there.
Aww.
Yes, I thought of going to speak to him, and then I thought he looked very peaceful. I would probably leave him alone. He wasn't very well a few weeks ago. We were a bit worried. We hadn't seen him very much, but I think he is probably the most popular inhabitant of Downing Street. Prime Ministers come and go, but everybody that visits wants to speak to Larry. And as we know, he's a very, very big star.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you so much, Catherine, for all of the news, of course, on U-turns, on boats, but also, of course, on Larry the cat.
Larry the cat basking in the shade. Actually, probably needs it today. Anyway, we're going to go to a very serious story today. Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault.
Well, this was following convictions of attempted murder, grievous bodily harm, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon.
Well, we're joined by GBNews Home Security Editor Mark White to tell us more. Mark?
Yeah, hopefully we can bring those images back up. That was 37-year-old Marcus Monzo, who was posing with his samurai sword at home with the pet cat. And, you know, as horrific as this attack was, you know, what he did to that cat as well was also just unspeakable. This is the incident unfolding in Hainault, a 20-minute rampage on the 30th of April last year, when Marcus Monzo took that samurai sword and virtually decapitated 14-year-old Daniel Angerin in the street outside his home. Police eventually catching up with him, but not before he'd injured 5 other people, including 2 police officers during that. We've been hearing victim impact statements from Dr. Ebenezer Angerin, the father of this young man, Daniel Angerin, who said it was 7:15 in the morning. Daniel had just left for school at 7 a.m. And his older brother had told him that Daniel had been stabbed. Dr. Ebenezer Angerin said that he ran out into the street saw this hunched up body lying in the street, didn't realise it was his son until he got closer and recognised the sportswear that he was wearing. He said that he realised instantly that Daniel, who was lying in a pool of blood, was dead, but he held him, cradled him in his arms and his head as they awaited for the paramedics to arrive. But we've been hearing in that victim impact statement just how catastrophic this has been for the whole family. A young man that they will never be able to see growing up, getting married, having children. And they said that Marcus Monzo is someone who is a danger to society, someone who has never expressed remorse for the actions that day. We can actually bring you a clip. We can't bring you a clip. Sorry, we've been cut short.
We've run to time, but Mark will be back with you later in the programme. We've got to get to our very latest news bulletins, but do stay with us here on Good Afternoon Britain. Much more to come throughout this programme. Of course, Keir Starmer's Northern Ireland veteran czar has been branding the Labour Party's plans to axe a law protecting Troubles veterans from prosecution as immoral and two-tier justice. He joins us later, but after this break...
Tory MPs are calling for an outright ban on phones in schools after admitting guidance issued under former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak simply has not worked. It's your news.
Very good afternoon. The news headlines just after 12:30. The Prime Minister has made major welfare concessions, allowing current PIP and universal credit claimants with health conditions to keep their payments, a move praised by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values. A 29-year-old woman and two men aged 36 and 24 have been arrested on suspicion of a terror offence after two aircraft were damaged at RAF Bryce Norton in an action claimed by campaign group Palestine Action. Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Ajurin after a 20-minute horrific rampage in Hainault. Britain could face power blackouts lasting up to 2 weeks. Reports saying that's because the drive to net zero hasn't accounted for the country's unpredictable weather. And Glastonbury Festival is back with the likes of the 1975, Neil Young and Olivia Rodrigo all performing. But festival goers will have to take care as the hot weather continues, with highs of over 30 degrees expected this weekend. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. You may have heard the heat is returning, but only for some, particularly across southern areas through this weekend. Should be a fair bit of sunshine around, but it will stay on the cool side across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet day in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland today because of these weather fronts. Quite a few isobars on the chart. It's quite breezy, but fine and sunny for much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Staying wet, though, over Cumbria, western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing rain on and off through the day. And as I mentioned, it is quite breezy. Quite warm, though, this afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 25, 26, maybe 27 Celsius. It is a little cooler further north and obviously not feeling very pleasant with the wind and the rain, which will persist over western Scotland, particularly the Highlands and the Western Isles through much of the night. It's not much of that rain getting to Aberdeenshire and parts of the Northern Isles, just turning a little showery here later on. The west of Northern Ireland seeing some outbreaks of rain, but further east turning a little drier this evening. Rain on and off across Cumbria and the hills and mountains of Wales too, but at low levels many places won't see much rain at all, but it will always stay cloudiest in the west. A fine summer's evening across much of the east, although it will be quite breezy. Now, as we go through the night, we won't see a great deal of change. Rain and drizzle over western hills and coasts, many other areas staying dry. It will be a warm night, though. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens in most towns and cities, and that is going to lead into a pretty humid feeling weekend. A cloudy start, murky start, but it should get brighter. Certainly a brighter day to come tomorrow across much of northern Scotland. Northern Ireland cheering up along with central Scotland. Staying fairly cloudy over the far north of England. Rain and drizzle on and off across Cumbria and northwest Wales. But further south, as the sun pops out, the temperature's really jumping up over 30 degrees Celsius and getting hotter for Sunday. Bye for now.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. Motorists on the M4 eastbound near junction 45 at Innisforgan face delays due to an accident. North of that, the M74 northbound between junctions 13 and 12 is affected by an incident. In Cornwall, the A30 eastbound is closed between its junctions with the A38 and A395 due to a severe collision. One lane is closed on the M25 anti-clockwise at junction 2, leading to delays. And on the trains, there's major disruption between London Euston and Milton Keynes Central, affecting Avanti West Coast and London North Western Railway services. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past midday. Now, Tory MPs are calling for a ban on phones in schools after admitting guidance issued under the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hasn't worked.
Yes, so the Shadow Education team have produced a mini documentary into the harm a smartphone-based childhood is doing to our kids. Let's have a watch.
Smartphones are an obvious disaster.
We now hear children talking about how do I pretend?
They're not effectively learning, interacting or speaking.
They have this sort of glazed look on their faces.
Mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, OCD.
Is an experience blocker.
I don't believe there's a single upside.
Since 2012, all over the developed world, there's been an explosion in mental health problems. And those problems are concentrated among young people, not older people. And they're not just people reporting that they're depressed or down. They're resulting in real-world harms, more self-harming, more young people turning up at accident and emergency. And people have looked at the data, all the alternative possible explanations, but the only thing that fits the data all over the world is the rise of a smartphone-based childhood and social media.
Well, this all comes as a new study has found that students are set to spend 25 years of their lives glued to their phones, as the average person in school, college or university currently spends 5.5 hours a day on their mobile phone.
Oh, I'm probably guilty, aren't I? Yes, but Labour seem to think the current policy is fine. They say that 90% of schools are already banning these mobile phones, but are they? Let's speak to Shadow Education Minister Neil O'Brien. Neil, thank you very much indeed. Yes, the government's stance on all this seems to be that most schools are banning them anyway, so there's no need to interfere any further into the issue. What do you say, Neil?
Well, a lot of schools will say they've got a ban, but what they actually mean by that is that they have a policy where kids are not supposed to have them out in class. And in fact, a study by Policy Exchange finds that only about 1 in 10 secondary schools has a proper ban where the kids hand the phones in at the start of the day and then get them back at the end of the day. And we can see from the government's own behaviour survey, the DfE's own behaviour survey, that mobile phones are disrupting about half of classes in GCSE year. So you can see from the government's own data that there is a problem here. And the reason why these schools don't always ban them is that a small minority of parents can be unreasonably determined to get hold of their kids at any time of the day. Something that none of our parents needed to do, right? The parents can always ring the school if there is something that's a desperate emergency. And yet, because of that small minority, schools have policies that don't work. And we know from lots of studies that just having their phones on them reduces kids' attention. And we know that teachers now spend a huge amount of their time having endless fights over discipline and having to tell the kids to put their phones away. And it just makes the life a misery for the teacher, and it leads very clearly to lower achievement in school.
I hadn't considered that element of the sort of helicopter parent lobbying the schools to make sure that their children are able to play Candy Crush or whatever it is in the middle of a maths lesson. But this seems to be something that most reasonable people would think schools should be doing. It seems very strange that the government seems to be quite so laissez-faire in this attitude. Across all other areas of policy, they seem to be rather interventionist.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is trying to micromanage every school in the country. Through the schools bill, she is creating a situation where if they want to put up a bike shed, they will need to apply to the Secretary of State for permission. She's controlling the number of items of uniform. She's saying that primary schools can't have a tie, secondary schools can. It's just absolutely absurd. And yet, on this thing where it would actually make a difference and where the politicians do have a responsibility to take a lead, they're saying, oh no, just leave it all to the market. And I do think the government has been a bit captured by tech lobbyists on some of this. But I think the main reason is just we started proposing it, and reactively Bridget Phillipson said she was against it for no good reason. But the evidence is clear. This would be a positive thing for kids. It would be very, very good for teachers too.
Do you know what? You know, the parents who are saying, I want my little child, I want my Horatio or my James to have his phone with him all the time. I think being constantly contactable is what's bringing a lot of anxiety. And knowing that you need to reply instantly. I mean, yes, as you say, back in the day, you'd go the whole day without hearing from mum or dad.
Yeah, and that's fine.
And it is anxiety-inducing. Neil... Sorry, go on.
One of the interesting things about it is that the kids themselves don't really like this. And when I first did work on this in 2018 with the Science and Technology Committee, we interviewed all of them. And I'd meet them all the time in schools. In fact, I did that this morning. And the children themselves wish they were in a situation where nobody was on their phones all the time. They have this fear of missing out because they feel like, well, if I'm not on there, everyone else will be. But what they actually enjoy is being able to be in the same kind of situation that we get to enjoy as children, where not everybody's on their phones all the time. And that constant quest for the latest update, the latest hit, how many likes have I got for my comment, the constant pressure to comment, to be on there all the time. I mean, all these things are designed by absolute geniuses to be very, very addictive.
Yeah, Neil, I'm just looking at my daily average screen time.
No.
2 hours, 39 minutes. Well, that's all right.
That's all right.
So
I was just laughing then, because in a conversation about being distracted by mobile phones, Emily, you did just get on your mobile phone.
It was for research purposes.
But that was relevant, pertinent to the conversation. Neil, we are running out of time, but I just wanted to ask you one final question, because you mentioned that the government is going to ban primary school children from wearing ties. I mean, that seems to have passed me by completely. What on earth is going on there?
So in the schools bill, they're going to be able to have 4 items of uniform, including a tie, in secondary, but only 3 items in primary. And so schools will have to choose. Do you want to have a uniform jumper? Do you want to have a dress in the summer? And what schools are going to end up doing because of these rules is they'll basically have to ban uniform PE kit, I suspect. And what will happen is that then there will be pester power. Kids will end up asking for Adidas and Nike stuff. It will end up costing parents even more, and it will backfire. But it's just mad. I mean, the government has no vision for education apart from to smash up the cross-party reforms of the last 30 years.
They promise
they're
trying to make things cheaper for parents.
Yeah, that is the theory. In practice, it's going to definitely backfire, because what the alternative to school uniform will be actually branded items that cost more money.
Yeah.
And the mad thing about it is there's no positive vision for our schools. They've totally broken their promises in terms of more teachers. There are actually now fewer teachers, and they're just trying to lie about it. And yet they're prepared to go sort of micromanagement mad and lean over the shoulders of every head teacher in the country over things like what kind of school uniform you're wearing.
Yeah, is uniform really the biggest issue for our education system? I'm not so sure. Neil O'Brien, thank you so much. Shadow Education Minister, great to speak to you this afternoon.
And people should know that if they want to watch that full mini documentary, I think you can get it on Neil O'Brien's Twitter account and all other
25 years spent on your phone.
Yeah.
Or in front of a screen.
But if you want to sit in front of a beach, or perhaps...
on a beach.
On a beach, even. But sitting in front of a beach would imply you're on a boat. But wherever you want to be, don't be in front of a screen. Perhaps go on holiday. Here's the travel weather.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Temperatures are likely to be 5 to 10 degrees above the average for June across parts of France and Spain. Very hot conditions persisting here. A bit of a breeze, but also temperatures above average in the Canaries, getting over 30 degrees for the next few days. Highs over 32 across Italy. Plenty of hot and sunny weather here. A few showers across mainland parts of Greece, but most of the Greek islands have turned a little bit cooler with some pleasant sunshine here and plenty more sunshine to come around the Mediterranean into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Well, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has just had this to say about Keir Starmer's U-turn on the welfare bill.
He can meet our three conditions, that we will support him, that he has to reduce the welfare budget, that he has to make sure people get into work. At the moment, the bill doesn't do that. The U-turn makes it even worse. And they have to commit to not having more tax rises. None of those things are unreasonable requests. The Chancellor herself said no new tax rises, but we want the Prime Minister to make those commitments, and he won't do that. Instead, he's just giving up. And that's why we're very worried about our ability to pay for defence, about our ability as a country to get anything done. If they can't solve minor problems, how are they going to deal with the big ones?
What would you do then? Do you think their planned reforms go far enough? Would you cut further?
One of the things that we need to do is get people back into work. That's going to be a game changer. Their plans, according to their own impact assessment, don't get people back into work. How do we do that? Let's start by looking at the assessments. During COVID, for understandable reasons, we had remote assessments. That has continued. It needs to stop. There are a lot of people who should be at work who are just ringing up, who are getting benefits that they're not entitled to. And we also need to look at the huge increase in low-level conditions like anxiety. Many of the new claims are for conditions like that. The best thing for many of those people is to have a healthy work environment, getting them back into work. There's a lot that we can do to make sure that those people who really need it, those people who have those very serious physical conditions, can get the support they need while getting other people back into work. That's all we're asking Labour to do, and they wouldn't do that.
Do you feel there's much chance of you being able to do that, given the recent YouGov poll, though, about if a general election happened today, the majority of votes would go to reform?
We are the only party that is serious about fiscal responsibility. Reform want even more benefits. They're talking about lifting the two-child benefit cap. More and more benefits is not the answer. We are not living within our means. We're spending over £100 billion every year above what we earn. We're paying another £100 billion on the interest on our debt alone. Not the debt, that's the interest on our debt. That's our children's money. There's only one party that is serious about bringing that bill down and making sure there is something to hand over to the next generation, and that's the Conservative Party.
But surely doesn't it worry you that at the moment you're in opposition? You know, that should be the great position to be when you can shout about what you want. But at the moment, reform is doing far better.
We have to remember that we have just been removed from office. Just last year, we suffered a historic defeat. Most oppositions take 18 years, 14 years, 13 years to come back from that. We're going to do it in 4 years, but it's not going to happen overnight. And the way we're going to do it is by rebuilding trust with the public, and that means being honest with them about what is going on. We're not going to make false promises like reform that can't be delivered, or like Labour did, telling people, like the WASPy women, that they were going to do things for them that they could not do when they got into government. That's why they're in this mess, because they did not have a plan. We're going to make sure that we have a plan that's going to get this country back on track.
Well, the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch there, responding to the government's U-turn. Do stay with us on Good Afternoon Britain. Plenty more to come, of course, over the next 2 hours. First, it's your latest weather forecast.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. You may have heard the heat is returning, but only for some, particularly across southern areas through this weekend. Should be a fair bit of sunshine around, but it will stay on the cool side across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet day in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland today because of these weather fronts. Quite a few isobars on the chart. It's quite breezy, but fine and sunny for much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Staying wet, though, over Cumbria, western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing rain on and off through the day. And as I mentioned, it is quite breezy. Quite warm, though, this afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 25, 26, maybe 27 Celsius. It is a little cooler further north and obviously not feeling very pleasant with the wind and the rain, which will persist over western Scotland, particularly the Highlands and the Western Isles through much of the night. It's not much of that rain getting to Aberdeenshire and parts of the Northern Isles, just turning a little showery here later on. The west of Northern Ireland seeing some outbreaks of rain, but further east turning a little drier this evening. Rain on and off across Cumbria and the hills and mountains of Wales too, but at low levels many places won't see much rain at all, but it will always stay cloudiest in the west. A fine summer's evening across much of the east, although it will be quite breezy. Now, as we go through the night, we won't see a great deal of change. Rain and drizzle over western hills and coasts, many other areas staying dry. It will be a warm night, though. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens in most towns and cities, and that is going to lead into a pretty humid feeling weekend. A cloudy start, murky start, but it should get brighter. Certainly a brighter day to come tomorrow across much of northern Scotland. Northern Ireland cheering up along with central Scotland. Staying fairly cloudy over the far north of England. Rain and drizzle on and off across Cumbria and northwest Wales. But further south, as the sun pops out, the temperature's really jumping up over 30 degrees Celsius and getting hotter for Sunday. Bye for now.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Yeah, so I got the news on 4th of April, right in between GB team selection series, which hurt even more because I was leading in the points. But all of a sudden, I get a phone call being told you're banned from attending any public UK premises, banned from speaking with your teammates or staff, which was the most brutal part of it, and suspended, or whatever word you want to use.
I think, though, Kurt, that, posting subscription-only saucy content online might get you in a little bit of trouble, or did it not cross your mind?
No, for sure. But I want to make it clear that I have tried things in the past. I've been living life on the edge so many years. We moved from Latvia in 2010, been living life on the edge since then, done everything from working freelance long into the long nights, working at the Amazon warehouse. I have seeked out other alternatives. But in December last year, I got to a point, a realization where I thought, is it worth it? Or can I find an alternative? And I knew of other GB athletes doing it. I didn't think it was going to cause outrage like this.
Yeah, because I was thinking, a nice chap like you, who's obviously very talented with your sport, you could make some money doing, like online fitness training or personal training and things like that don't involve, getting your kit off.
No, for sure. I've been making content for like 6-7 years now. Over 1,000 of the pieces of content have been inspirational, motivational. I've visited over 30 schools in the UK, going to the hardest parts of the UK, inspiring kids from underprivileged backgrounds to get into sport. I've tried that, but I don't know. I found that in this day and age, unless you are smart or find some little controversial thing you can hold on to, it's going to be hard to get attention and sponsorship.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of June. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer says he deeply regrets his Island of Strangers immigration speech, saying, "I wouldn't have used those words if I had known they were, or even would be, interpreted as an echo of Enoch Powell."
And that's not the only government U-turn today. No, the Prime Minister is left scarred and rudderless as he agrees existing disability claimants can keep their benefits. Now that is going to cost £3 billion to the taxpayer.
Migrant swap. Britain and France are negotiating a new deal to exchange Channel migrants for asylum seekers in a one-in, one-out policy. But will it stop the boats?
Elsewhere, Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute samurai sword rampage in Hainault.
And Keir Starmer's Northern Ireland Veterans Tsar has branded Labour's plans to axe a law protecting Troubles veterans from prosecution as immoral and also two-tiered justice. He joins us later.
Elsewhere, a GB News exclusive. Blackout Britain. The country could face 2-week power outages as a result of our dash towards net zero.
And is it shoplifting? Is it graffiti? Is it playing music out loud on the bus? Stay tuned to find out what pet peeves and crimes Brits most are concerned about. Well, it's U-turn city today, isn't it?
I mean, what does 2 U-turns make? A circle?
Well, yes, but then it's not a U-turn, is it?
Well, they are on different issues. No, the Prime Minister has U-turned on his language around migration. Around a month ago, he gave a speech where he said, we don't want to become an island of strangers with sort of separated communities and all the rest of it. And now he says, sorry, that was too much like Enoch Powell.
I mean, but does he agree with anything else he said in that speech? Because he said quite a lot. He said that the Conservatives had a failed experiment when it came to high levels of immigration, which is quite a punchy thing to say for a Labour politician.
He also said something along the lines of, I've always believed in immigration restriction.
Well...
which struck me as odd at the time, given his long and varied history of campaigning against immigration restriction.
Yes, hasn't he signed letters and tried to stop deportations aplenty? in the past.
Yeah, I mean...
Turn a new leaf, Tom, or perhaps different principles for different times?
Well, very different principles, because it's not just about the deporting of foreign criminals that he's sort of campaigned against in the past. He's also acted on behalf of environmental campaigners who broke into an RAF base.
Yep.
And now he's proscribing Palestine action for breaking into an RAF base. I mean, he's either had a Damascene conversion or perhaps he just believes the last thing the last person told him.
Well, do you know what? I'm actually sick of it. And I think a lot of people are sick of it. Just tell us what you think about things and then we'll judge whether we agree with you or not. Seriously, it's not that hard. Just taking the public for mugs. Oh, just tell them this one day. Well, that will appeal to the reformy types. Oh, and then I'll say to the Observer this, that I'm not a racist and I don't like Enoch Powell, because that will please them too. It's pathetic. Anyway, get in touch, gbnews.com/yoursay. But let's get to the headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. Very good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. These are your latest headlines. Top story today, the Prime Minister has bowed to pressure from Labour rebels with major concessions announced on welfare reform. Current recipients of PIP and universal credit with health conditions will now be able to keep their payments. This is a move described by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values.
The government's been really listening to Labour MPs and is going to protect people who are currently in receipt of personal independence payments so that it won't decrease. And also people who receive the health element of universal credit, that will also be protected. So, you know, in line with Labour values, it's about protecting the most vulnerable. But I would say all of us want to see people in work who can be in work and want to work. And we're very committed to this bill, which promotes movement into work. But these changes are really critical to protecting the most vulnerable.
Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall confirms the changes in a letter to MPs following days of crisis talks, but she is now optimistic that the bill will pass on Tuesday.
I really believe these are positive changes. We've worked hard to get agreement on this. There's really, really strong commitment to the principles of reforming our welfare state. Those who can work should get help, and we have the biggest ever investment into employment support for sick and disabled people, but also to protect those who can never work, make sure their incomes are protected and make sure they're never reassessed again.
3 people have been arrested on suspicion of terrorism after planes were vandalised at RAF Brize Norton. It follows an incursion claimed by Palestine Action, the protest group which is about to be banned by the Home Secretary. Counter-terror police say 2 men and a woman were detained after last week's attack, which saw red paint sprayed into the jet engine of a military aircraft. A 4th person, a 41-year-old woman, was also arrested for assisting an offender. Habibur Massoum has been found guilty of murdering his wife by stabbing her to death as she pushed their baby in a pram. Convicted this morning at Bradford Crown Court, the 26-year-old was described as a violent, jealous and controlling husband who murdered his wife after tracking her to a women's refuge centre. Massoum launched a ferocious knife attack in broad daylight before leaving her bleeding to death and calmly walking away, leaving their 7-month-old son behind. In a major shift, France has agreed to take back some Channel migrants under a new one-in, one-out pilot scheme with the UK. Under the plan, for every illegal migrant arriving in Britain, 1 will be returned to France within a matter of weeks. It's the first deal of its kind, and it's aimed at stopping repeat crossings and hitting people smuggling gangs. The Home Secretary is expected to unveil the policy next week ahead of President Macron's state visit to London. GB News spoke to Shadow Paymaster General Richard Holden earlier to hear his doubts.
It's going to actually increase the number of people crossing the Channel, and it's going to be sort of weird merry-go-round in the middle of the English Channel as we have people coming on one side and then shifting them back just for others to come on the reverse again. It's completely ridiculous. What we should have is a proper deterrent, like we had with the Rwanda scheme, which said if you come here illegally, you do not get to stay in the UK.
A major search is underway for a missing 13-year-old boy feared to have vanished near the River Tees. Milo Capilla was last seen at around 9 p.m. on Thursday night in an area known locally as the Muddies. Emergency services, including police, fire crews and mountain rescue teams, have been scouring the riverside through the night, with the police helicopter still circling overhead. Officers are urging the public not to enter the water and to speak to the police on the ground if they want to help. Now, no time for fear. That's how Inspector Malloy Campbell described the moment he ran towards a sword-wielding attacker in a desperate bid to save lives. Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of the 14-year-old Daniel Andurin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault in East London. The dual Spanish-Brazilian national has also been convicted of attempted murder, GBH, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon. Officers say more lives would have been lost if the police hadn't acted when they did. And the iconic Glastonbury Festival is back and in full swing with a star-studded lineup this weekend. Rod Stewart takes the Legends slot, while the 1975, Neil Young and the Chrome Hearts and Olivia Rodrigo all headline at the Pyramid Stage. Meanwhile, the BBC has confirmed it will not show Neil Young's headline set at the artist's request. But festival goers will need to keep their wits about them, as a second amber heat health alert has been issued for southern and eastern England this weekend. Temperatures are expected to pass 30 degrees from today through until Tuesday, with health officials urging caution as the heatwave continues. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now, but first, let's have a quick look at the markets.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.372 and 1.171 euros. The price of gold is £2,392.14 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,785 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
OK, it's 1:09. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says he deeply regrets saying this.
We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower-paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo.
Well, that was the Prime Minister speaking in a landmark speech on immigration back last month. But today, speaking with the Observer newspaper, he insisted he didn't even know the words echoed. Well, I mean, I didn't think anyone really saw the words. Look, what he said was...
He was accused.
He was accused by lots of people that this, somehow echoed Enoch Powell. And he said, sorry if it even slightly sounded like something Enoch Powell said.
Despite the fact for weeks Number 10 have stood by those words, and Keir Starmer has asked his ministers to stand by those words and the Labour Party to stand by those words. But no, speaking to the Observer, he divulged that actually he deeply regrets it all.
Well, let's discuss this now with the former Conservative Immigration Minister Kevin Foster and the political commentator Fahima Mahmoud. Thanks so much for joining us. Kevin, let's start with you. This is an extraordinary about-turn from the Prime Minister, but I think even more extraordinary, perhaps, was the criticism of just using the word strangers.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I think he's taking people for fools if he thinks they're going to accept an explanation that he's giving. This was not an off-the-cuff remark. This wasn't perhaps a quick response to a question in the chamber when he was under pressure. It was a planned speech he gave, and a big soundbite from that speech they wanted to brief out. And it doesn't take much to quickly find the quote online from Enoch Powell about people becoming strangers in their own country. And I find it hard to believe that his advisors did not check again. I remember what we used to do in government, particularly on areas like immigration, around speeches. So the idea he's basically asking people to believe that basically his team is pretty incompetent, which doesn't really fly at all. He wanted this to sound a tough speech. He wanted it to send a message. And now he's changing his tune. And goodness only knows what the Labour MPs and ministers, as you've touched on, have been out defending this language, will feel today when they now have to go out and somehow say, oh, well, actually, on second thoughts, the Prime Minister was right to reconsider.
Well, they're probably relieved because they probably would agree with the change of heart that the Prime Minister has clearly had. Fahima Mohammed, what do you think? Do you think he's right to distance himself from these remarks, completely backtrack after he made them loud and clear in that speech?
Well, I do believe Starmer's regret over the island of strangers remarks shows the danger of using loaded language on migration. And while managing migration is legitimate framing it as a threat to our identity fuels division. So he's right to actually backtrack. The reality that the UK takes fewer asylum seekers per capita than other countries like France or Germany, most Channel migrants are genuine refugees fleeing war and persecution, with over 70% granted asylum. So no UK government, Labour, Conservative or otherwise, can simply ignore legal obligations under the Refugee Convention or British law. So the focus should be on the practical border management and integration, not rhetoric that alienates communities and undermines...
Isn't the thing that alienates communities having sort of segregated and parallel societies? I mean, surely it's legitimate to say that we should have a sort of cohesive sense of Britishness, that there should be integration among new arrivals. I mean, is that an illegitimate political point to make?
Absolutely, and integration requires both newcomers and the host communities to engage. It's not just migrants' responsibilities. Many migrants do learn English and actively contribute. And at the same time, we need to also see that there's discomfort about diverse neighbourhoods. And people have said, you know, that it's unfamiliar and it does cause prejudice. But what they really need is education and community building. So it works both ways. You cannot say that at one hand they need to integrate, and on the other hand, there's people moving out because they don't like their neighbours. And that causes and breeds segregation and misunderstanding.
OK, well, Kevin Foster, put to you that Keir Starmer also said in that speech, well, he spoke a lot about the Conservatives and their record on immigration, and he said that they'd indulged in some kind of mass experiment when it came to immigration and that it had gone awfully wrong.
Well, I'm still trying to remember all the letters I received from Keir Starmer demanding less immigration. In fact, I can't remember them at all. I got absolutely none during our time in office. And yes, there should have been moves taken, let's say, after my time in the role, to have increased salary thresholds and more quickly deal with some of the areas of abuse that emerged in the legal migration system after the pandemic. But, you know, this was Keir Starmer wanting to be punchy, wanting to be tough. And it sounds like perhaps some of those conversations with Labour MPs about the welfare bill, he's been hearing what they actually think about his thoughts on border control. And therefore, we've seen this U-turn today. But ultimately, what you actually need is not so much rhetoric, it's actually a solid policy. And what does he follow through on his white paper? Will he actually look to move certain sectors away from dependence on immigration? Or will he slip back into, let's say, cutting spending on training and then looking for immigration to fill the gap instead?
Kevin, I want to sort of understand what's going on in Number 10. Of course, you worked closely in the previous government with all the sorts of ministers. You were sent out to do media. You knew the lines to take. And obviously, one of the reasons Boris Johnson was defenestrated as Prime Minister was because those lines to take kept changing. There was U-turn after U-turn after U-turn, a sense of chaos at the core of government. Do you see echoes of that at the centre of this government today?
There's certainly plenty of echoes of times, and also remember at the back end of Theresa May's administration when few Conservative MPs would rush out into the media to defend things because you thought, well, I could be at 9 o'clock on a show defending something and at 10 o'clock hear that they've done a U-turn. So if you're a Labour MP, you spent Christmas writing to pensioners saying winter fuel cuts were the right thing. You spent January writing to constituents saying there was no need for a national grooming gangs inquiry. You then spent the last month writing to people saying the Prime Minister was right in this speech. You probably also spent a bit of time writing, saying how important it was to reform welfare, and now you're finding on all of those you need to send a letter saying exactly the opposite.
That's quite a list, isn't it?
It does undermine confidence in your leadership when that happens, no matter actually what view you take on the subjects themselves.
Yeah, I mean, Fahima, it's not looking great. I mean, that is a whopping list of U-turns, isn't it? Even the BBC were calling out the hat trick, they said, of U-turns. Although I think there are a few more than a hat trick now, calling it out, saying it's all getting rather awkward, Fahima. Can you trust anything he says now?
I don't think we can trust any politician from any party personally for what they say, but I do feel that debate does become distorted when everything is focused just on small boat crossings, when there's much bigger sort of a picture on this. And the majority of migration in the UK comes from work visa students, skilled workers, and the actual problem lies within the government processes. And that's what the real issue needs to be discussed more than just the migrants themselves.
OK, well, Fahima Mohammed and Kevin Foster, thank you very much indeed for your time on that one. I just think it just looks so utterly weak.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Although, to be fair, you were calling for some of these U-turns.
Was I? Which ones?
Winter fuel.
Well, yes, that was not a mess, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Utter mess. I think it's all about the way that they implement things, the way they announce. Then they sort of wait for some kind of backlash. Then the backlash comes. Then they and ah. They say, no, we're going to stick with this. And then they end up changing their minds. If you're going to do something controversial, just stick with it. And banging on about, how you've got a massive majority, well, use it then.
Isn't it nice to have the adults back in charge?
Oh, yes, that was it, wasn't it? And what was it that Andrew Marr said?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yes, yes. How everything's much more settled down now and we can all sigh of peace and stability. How long did that last? Anyway, serious news. Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault. This following convictions of attempted murder, GBH, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon.
Well, with us in the studio to explain more is our Home and Security editor, Mark White.
Well, this was a horrific attack that took place on the 30th of April last year. 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin was heading to school at 7 in the morning when he was attacked by Marcus Monzo with a samurai sword. We've got some images we can show you. This was, first of all, Marcus Monzo with posing with his samurai sword and his pet cat that he later killed before going on a 20-minute rampage in this residential street in Hainault. And there you see the police trying to confront him. And it was a horrific situation that they were met with. One of the officers actually was quite badly injured. That officer, Yasmin Mecham-Whitfield, has given a victim impact statement in the last hour. She said, I find this emotionally devastating. Every morning as I try to cover up the scar and dent on the left side of my head, I no longer want to travel by myself or go out of the house without someone being with me. I have a fear of being attacked again and not being able to defend myself. Well, the inspector in charge of her unit, who was rushing to the scene as well to help confront Marcus Monzo, was listening over the radio as his officer was attacked. He's been giving an interview reacting to the events that day. Let's listen to what he said.
As we were heading to the incident, my sergeant was driving and I was in the operator's seat, and as we heard that transmission, police officer stabbed, I think I turned to him and said, just get us there. Don't speed up, don't let red mist get to you. We need to get there and get control of this incident. And that's the only thing. You need to switch back into the basics of being a police officer on the ground, which is the preservation of life. And that's it. And so that's the only thing I was thinking of, the need to preserve life. And that includes the police officers on the ground.
So it was a really terrifying situation that was unfolding, and he knew actually that armed response officers were about 10-15 minutes away, so they weren't going to be there in time, and he had to make that decision about what to do next. Listen to Inspector Malloy Campbell again.
And so, yeah, it was just a case of doing what I thought needed to be done. It was a decision. Do we contain the defendant or do we confront? And that was a decision that needed to be made quickly. And obviously the decision was to confront, because I felt that had we done anything else, then more members of the public and potentially police officers would have been seriously injured or worse.
So Inspector Malloy Campbell there, who was himself injured, he suffered a severe injury to his hand as he tried to confront Marcus Monzo. And we've been hearing a victim impact statement as well from Dr. Ebenezer Anjorin, the father of young Daniel Anjorin, who said that his Daniel's older brother had rushed into the house to say that he had been stabbed. Dr. Anjorin rushed out, saw what looked like someone hunched up on the ground, saw that it was his son, but realised that he was dead, that there was not a lot he could do for him. But he held his son, held his head in his hands as he waited for the paramedics to arrive on scene.
It's just so awful. I mean, so we're awaiting sentencing now.
Within the next hour, sentencing will begin at the Old Bailey. That will be televised, and at least some of that we'll bring to you on GB News.
OK, fantastic. I'm expecting a long sentence, presumably.
He will, without a doubt, receive a very long sentence. Whether it will be a whole life tariff, I'm not so sure, but certainly a very significant time behind bars.
Just a hideous crime, and I know that one of his defences or attempted defences was his drug use.
Well, yes, he was apparently psychotic with very heavy reliance on cannabis. It just goes to show you, whatever the Mayor of London says about the need to be a bit more sort of relaxed in terms of cannabis laws, there are those, and the police will argue this, who see the day-to-day effects of the psychosis that prolonged cannabis use can bring on.
OK, well, Mark White, thank you very much. And do bring us that sentencing when we get it. We'll bring that to you at home as well. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show.
Yes, is it shoplifting, graffiti, perhaps playing music out loud on the bus? Well, stay tuned to find out what pet peeves and indeed serious crimes Britons are most concerned about region by region.
And stay tuned too, because Sir Keir Starmer's Northern Ireland veteran czar has branded Labour's plans to axe a law protecting Troubles veterans from prosecution as immoral and also two-tier justice. He joins us after the break.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 1. Now, Sir Keir Starmer's veteran czar has slammed plans to scrap protections for Northern Ireland soldiers who served during the Troubles, calling it immoral and two-tier justice.
OK, the Veterans Commissioner for Northern Ireland, David Johnston, has warned that repealing the Legacy Act, which is the plan, would expose up to 70 former troops to vexatious lawfare.
Well, joining us now is the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner and former Army reservist, David Johnston. Thanks so much for making the time for us, David. This is clearly a real and present concern for so many veterans.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I think it is interesting that today is PTSD Awareness Day, and it's not lost on me that the topic of legacy impacts the health of so many of our armed forces, and certainly there is great anger, frustration at the current policy of the Labour government to repeal parts of the Legacy Act that will see more and more of our soldiers have their files passed to the PPS and potentially end up in the dock. And we could have multiple Dennis Hutchings, who for 10 years was dragged through a legal system and who ended up dying on his own in a hotel room as an 80-year-old veteran. That cannot be allowed to happen.
So what's driving this among the Labour Party then? Because Johnny Mercer, who was the Veterans Minister, wasn't he, for the Conservatives, he did a huge amount of work on this. And now Labour are just planning to scrap the lot. What exactly is happening, David?
Yeah, I think to be fair, the issue of legacy is complex. It is difficult, and successive British governments have tried to wrestle with this. You do have a divided society in Northern Ireland who view the Troubles from different perspectives. But certainly as the Veterans Commissioner, I feel the nettle must now be grasped. And certainly from my perspective, the veterans in Northern Ireland that I represent feel that the current Secretary of State and the Labour government and the Prime Minister are getting advice from the wrong people. They should be taking on the concerns of veterans more, particularly those senior officers in the Special Forces who lived through the darkest, difficult days of the Troubles, who were sent out by this government lawfully to carry out some of the operations that they're now being questioned over 30, 40, 50 years later. And I think what's frustrating for many veterans is this. There's a lot of discussion around morality and justice and European Court of Human Rights. But here's the reality. Justice and morality in Northern Ireland died in 1998. And the Belfast Agreement opened the doors of the jails and let the most hardened, ruthless, psychopathic terrorists out of jail. There were on-the-run letters provided, royal pardons, so there was an amnesty effectively given to all the terrorists. And then there was decommissioning, which destroyed the very evidence that could hold those terrorists to account. So morality and justice and accountability died in 98, and yet somehow, 27 years on, we're looking at putting soldiers into the dock. We're looking at inquests carried out by those who don't know what it is like to be in a scenario like a Loughgall, like a Hainault situation. And therefore, that's the heart of the matter. The morality of this, British soldiers were sent lawfully by the British government. They were given orders. They were given very clear rules of engagement. And of course, let me say, if any soldiers acted outside rules of engagement, then they should be held accountable. But many of these inquests that are going to come to place if the current government has its way, the incidents were already investigated. We've already had coroner's reports.
David, are the right people listening to you? Are the right people listening to you? Do you sense that you're being heard on this?
Well, to be fair, the Secretary of State is always open to conversations, but I think there is a difference. In veterans feel there's a difference between being heard and being listened to. And it just seems that there's a default mechanism back to the European Court of Human Rights or pledges and promises given in political campaigns and in policy documents. So
and let's be frank, this administration is wedded to international law. This administration wants to stick by the line of the ECHR, wants to stick by what you talk about, the human rights legislation there. So is that not a direct... Well, it's a difficulty, isn't it, to say the least, David?
Well, it is and it isn't, because again, let's take a step back. The ECHR only came into force and into effect in 2000. The various incidents we're talking about happened long before this, and certainly as Veterans Commissioner, the veterans say to me, it's not morally right to hold soldiers to a legal standard that did not even exist when they went onto the ground to face armed terrorists. And then, you know, in addition, you look at something like Loughgall, 8 terrorists. The East Tyrone Brigade was responsible for round about 250 murders. The ECHR human rights legislation was not designed to protect terrorists. It was not designed to protect those who were engaged in the taking of life in a brutal manner. So I think we need to really unpack what exactly is meant by ECHR and really question how it is allowed to apply to our soldiers who were carrying out lawful actions.
OK. Well, Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, former Army Reservist David Johnston, thanks so much for talking us through this really pertinent issue.
A lot of things come back to the ECHR, don't they?
Yeah.
Various human rights legislations that perhaps aren't fit for purpose in this day and age.
Well, we should say that Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary of State, insisted that the government was right to scrap the effective Troubles amnesty. He said the Legacy Act has been rejected in Northern Ireland and found by our domestic courts to be unlawful, not least because it would have offered immunity to terrorists. Any incoming government would have had to repeal unlawful legislation, and it is simply wrong for anyone else to suggest otherwise. I and the Secretary of Defence are engaging with our veterans community, with all interested parties over future legislation, and we will ensure that there are far better protections in place.
OK, well, do get in touch on that one. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. A GB News exclusive for you. Yes, Blackout Britain. This country could face 2-week power outages as a result of the country's dash towards net zero.
And is it shoplifting? Graffiti? Perhaps playing music out loud on the bus? Stay tuned to find out what pet peeves are most concerning Brits up and down the country, and indeed what crimes are too. All of that after your latest news headlines.
Very good afternoon. The headlines just after 1:30. The Prime Minister has made major welfare concessions, allowing current PIP and universal credit claimants with health conditions to keep their payments, a move praised by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values. A 29-year-old woman and 2 men aged 36 and 24 have been arrested on suspicion of a terror offence after 2 aircraft were damaged at RAF Bryce Norton in an action claimed by the campaign group Palestine Action. Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later on today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Anjurin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault following convictions of attempted murder, GBH, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon. And Britain could face power blackouts lasting up to 2 weeks. Reports saying that because the drive to net zero hasn't accounted for the country's unpredictable weather. And Glastonbury Festival is back in full flow, with the likes of the 1975, Neil Young and Olivia Rodrigo all performing. But festival goers will have to take care as the hot weather continues, with highs of over 30 expected this weekend. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. You may have heard the heat is returning, but only for some, particularly across southern areas through this weekend. Should be a fair bit of sunshine around, but it will stay on the cool side across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet day in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland today because of these weather fronts. Quite a few isobars on the chart. It's quite breezy, but fine and sunny for much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Staying wet, though, over Cumbria, western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing rain on and off through the day. And as I mentioned, it is quite breezy. Quite warm, though, this afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 25, 26, maybe 27 Celsius. It is a little cooler further north and obviously not feeling very pleasant with the wind and the rain, which will persist over western Scotland, particularly the Highlands and the Western Isles through much of the night. It's not much of that rain getting to Aberdeenshire and parts of the Northern Isles, just turning a little showery here later on. The west of Northern Ireland seeing some outbreaks of rain, but further east turning a little drier this evening. Rain on and off across Cumbria and the hills and mountains of Wales too, but at low levels many places won't see much rain at all, but it will always stay cloudiest in the west. A fine summer's evening across much of the east although it will be quite breezy. Now, as we go through the night, we won't see a great deal of change. Rain and drizzle over western hills and coasts, many other areas staying dry. It will be a warm night, though. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens in most towns and cities, and that is going to lead into a pretty humid feeling weekend. A cloudy start, murky start, but it should get brighter. Certainly a brighter day to come tomorrow across much of northern Scotland. Northern Ireland cheering up along with central Scotland. Staying fairly cloudy over the far north of England. Rain and drizzle on and off across Cumbria and northwest Wales. But further south, as the sun pops out, the temperature's really jumping up over 30 degrees Celsius and getting hotter for Sunday. Bye for now.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Motorists are advised to drive cautiously on the M74 northbound, where an incident partially restricted the carriageway between junctions 13 and 12. The M4 eastbound from junction 45 Winnisforgan to 44 Lonlass experiences delays following an accident earlier today. Congestion on the A50 eastbound between the A522 and the junction with the A518 at Toxeter East leads to 15-minute delays. All lanes are closed on the A30 eastbound between the A38 and the A395 due to a collision. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and London North Western Railway report disruptions between London Euston and Milton Keynes Central. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:38 on your Friday afternoon, and there are a lot of things that annoy me. And a lot of things that annoy Tom as well.
Oh, certainly.
On our high street, around your local area, up and down the country. For me, I hate shoplifting. It's a scourge on society.
Oh, I saw some shoplifting the other day. I was in a shop in central London, and I didn't realise it was a group of kids, and I didn't realise what had gone on until afterwards. There was 2 or 3 people who worked in the shop who just were saying those kids ran out without paying. And there's a whole group of them, and they just picked up a load of stuff off the shelves, and they just ran out completely brazen. No one to stop them. No, they knew they could do it.
I saw a professional young man who was about to go into his office job steal an M&S breakfast. Just ridiculous. Why does he deserve a M&S breakfast for free? Anyway...
Tell you what actually very much annoys me, because I see it every single day, and it's the blooming graffiti on the tube.
Yes. Well, should we remind ourselves? Because, we're going to have a look at this. So this is a fresh new poll, and this is from Freshwater Strategy exclusively for us on Good Afternoon Britain. And this is about what you, across the country, are most concerned about. As you can see, shoplifting is right up there at the top. Then you've got littering, public drug use, mobile phone theft, masks and balaclavas in public, that's a good one, vandalism, graffiti, tool theft, bicycle theft, fare evasion, thank you, Robert Jenrick, loud music in public, drinking in public, and then the number of barbershops there at the bottom.
Well, voters are, of course, most concerned there about shoplifting, although I took something into my own hands. I haven't yet apprehended a shoplifter, but I did try and scrub off some graffiti.
So, have a look at what we've been doing to this tube train. As we know, the Bakerloo line is absolutely riddled with graffiti. Well, not anymore, at least not so much on this particular carriage. We have been wiping away, swiping away.
So when he's not partying, he's washing graffiti off buses, not buses, tubes. Anyway, let's get to our GB News viewers, John Reid and Alan Gauci. Thank you very much indeed. John, tell us where you are and what gets you going around your local area in a bad way.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. I live in Kidderminster in Worcestershire, and the thing to worry about in this town, and I guess most towns in the UK, is drug taking. It's prolific. So I could take you to parts of the town where you can watch it and you can see it going on. And there's not enough police to do anything about it. And even if there was, they would get sentenced to a prison sentence. And would they get taken off drugs while they're in there? No, of course they wouldn't. And they'd return, having had a little bit of a holiday at our expense, and carry on doing it. So until we do something about the addiction, we're not going to stop the crime, are we? And where we stop the addiction, whether it's on the streets or in the police station or in the prison, wherever that happens to be, that's the place for me. So I think if you get rid of the drug taking, then the shoplifting, which funds a lot of it, will reduce automatically, and it would be a good thing for society generally and our town as well as many others. So, yeah, for me, drug taking is the one.
It is extraordinary seeing it just brazenly being done out in the open on the street. Just extraordinary. Alan, what particularly gets your goat?
On the same theme as drug taking, is vaping. That is the new antisocial behaviour. I mean, I live in a very quiet part of the country, North Hampshire. Even the school gym has a sign up saying vaping will not be tolerated. And yet, every morning I go out and I see all these vaping canisters all over the ground, just thrown down. And that's a big problem, is vaping now.
Is your concern with the litter or with the act of someone vaping?
Well, both, because vaping hasn't been proved to be any better for your health than smoking.
It is, it definitely is.
There are as many reports coming out saying there are problems with vaping.
I think all the authoritative studies say it's far safer for you than smoking.
Sorry, say that again?
I think all the authoritative studies say it's far safer for you than smoking is.
Well, they might be saying that, but you keep getting mixed sentiments coming out regarding that. I think because the authorities have said it's safer, everybody's just doing it. But they've said it's safer without really long consultations and long experimentation.
Yeah, and if people are just dumping them on the ground. I mean, the government have tried to ban disposable vapes, but I mean, you could chuck anything on the floor. They seem to all cost the same. Anyway, thank you to both of you. I think both of you raised some brilliant points there, John Reid and Alan Gauci. It is public drug taking, yeah.
It just degrades what sort of you expect your street to look like a street, not like some sort of
cracked in.
You said it, not me. Well, if you want to go and see some streets abroad, well, here's the travel weather for Europe.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Temperatures are likely to be 5 to 10 degrees above the average for June across parts of France and Spain. Very hot conditions persisting here. A bit of a breeze, but also temperatures above average in the Canaries, getting over 30 degrees for the next few days. Highs over 32 across Italy. Plenty of hot and sunny weather here. A few showers across mainland parts of Greece, but most of the Greek islands have turned a little bit cooler with some pleasant sunshine here and plenty more sunshine to come around the Mediterranean into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Now, experts are warning that lithium suppliers will not keep up with the demand for electric cars.
Yeah, researchers say domestic lithium production could grow as much by about 10 times what it currently is by 2030, but will still fall short of demand.
So this morning we're asking whether Labour's green car policy is unachievable.
This policy tells you everything you need to know about net zero. This isn't about giving people free choices about the technologies they want to use. This is about saying we're going to have mandatory targets. It's a sad indictment on our country if we've just normalised the government making these fundamental decisions for people's lives. The CEBR has warned that this policy might cost the country. That's rigid targets for battery electric vehicles, known as the ZEV mandate. 80% of all vehicles will have to be electric vehicles by 2030, rising to 100% by 2035. And that policy is expected to cost £400 billion to the UK economy. And of course, car makers as well have warned that this policy is not achievable.
The latest stats say 47% of vehicles sold in Britain are now EVs. We're halfway there after just 2 years of the electric mandate. We've another 5 years to go. It's speeding up. And this charge that lithium, we're going to have a shortage of lithium, is nonsense. What it says is that there may be the consumption of lithium is increasing, so the domestic production will not be sufficient, but there's plenty in the world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 48 minutes past 1. Now, veterans and serving personnel will be honoured in Cleethorpes as part of National Armed Forces Day.
And Anna Riley, our reporter, is there. Anna, what's happening?
Good afternoon to you both. Yes, well, this is a jam-packed 3-day weekend here in Cleethorpes. They've been chosen to host the national event, so it's a huge pride for the Cleethorpes area to be hosting this very special event in honour of our armed forces and our veterans. I'm joined now by Councillor Hayden Dawkins. He's responsible for tourism and leisure at North East Lincolnshire Council. Just tell us about this event, what it's all about and what's planned this long weekend.
Yes, I mean, this is a fantastic event. It's a celebration of the armed forces and the veterans, and it means a massive amount to the residents of North East Lincolnshire and the visitors.
What are the links that this area has got to the armed forces, and why are people here so proud of our forces?
People are massively proud here. I mean, you can walk around the resort, there's premises decorated, there's pubs decorated, there's cars decorated. It's like the end of the war here. It's really strange, but you know, people love the armed forces here. We're surrounded by military bases and in Lincolnshire, and the Spitfire and the Lancasters all come from Lincolnshire, so you know, we're immensely proud of it.
What's planned, what's in store for visitors, because you're going to have a higher turnout than Glastonbury, more than 300,000 people coming this weekend?
Absolutely, we don't need anyone top acts for Glastonbury, we can do it ourselves. I mean, this starts tonight 6 o'clock with a carnival parade that involves over 100 floats, runs through to a conclusion. Then we have live acts on stage, and then tomorrow is the big main event, which is right the way through the resort, everything you could imagine happening in Cleethorpes to do with armed forces.
So what have we got? We know we've got the Red Arrows, we've got all sorts.
Yeah, we've got the Red Arrows, we've got marching bands, we've got the big wheel, as you can see behind you, we've got live music, we've got food from all over the world, continental food markets, everything you can imagine.
And why is it now, do you think, more important than ever that we respect and honour our armed forces, especially with what's going on now internationally in terms of defence?
Yeah, I mean, armed forces are forgotten about, I think, a lot. But in North East Lincolnshire, we don't forget about our armed forces and the veterans. And you know, it's massively important, and they love coming to Cleethorpes. I speak to them every year, different ones every year, and they just love what we do, and they love that the residents take them under their, you know, control, and they love it. And you know, in my eyes, you know, this is an event that's going to carry on way after I've gone.
And in terms of the support for the veterans, what does the area do to support our veterans?
Well, the Armed Forces team behind me, who are responsible for this weekend, and they're absolutely fantastic at organising it, hence why we ended up with the National. They're fantastic. They also do a lot of stuff that's not on this weekend, so they support veterans throughout the year. Every day of the week they hold all sorts of events at their offices, and you know, that's what's important. It's not just what happens this weekend, it's what happens for the rest of the years as well.
So if people are thinking of turning out this weekend, what would you say?
Absolutely. Weather's going to be 27 degrees. That's tomorrow. Same on Sunday. I'd say come down on the train. Come into Cleethorpes by train is the best way, because obviously 350,000 people is going to be quite hard to get a parking space, I think.
Definitely. Very good words of advice there. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so that's what's going on here in Cleethorpes today and across the weekend, celebrating Armed Forces Day.
Marvellous stuff. Anna Riley, thanks indeed for being there for us.
Fantastic. OK, some of you have joined us in our discussion of things that irk us in our local community.
Oh, yeah.
Or indeed, criminal activity, let's be frank. Adrian says, not picking up your dog muck.
Oh!
Picking it up in a bag and dumping the bag in a tree. Disgusting.
No, not good.
What kind of reprobate would do that? John says, FaceTime calls on buses and trains. Why can't people put phones to their ears? That is so annoying. That is so annoying. FaceTime is not for public.
You can buy headphones for £5 or £6. I mean, not great quality headphones, but you can still buy headphones.
I told a little child to turn his phone, put his earphones in or whatever, and his mum didn't back me up. I ended up moving. I lost that battle. He was playing this really annoying game out loud on a quiet carriage, and I said something, and I got no backup at all.
Good for saying it.
Ian Wallace says, you're a saint, Tom. He's in awe of you cleaning some of Banksy's dross up.
Yeah, if only if it was as high quality as Banksy's lemon graffiti.
And Mark's getting into the nitty-gritty here. He says, I'm more annoyed about neighbours' kids playing football outside on the lawn. There's a lawn between all the houses. They hit the windows. Lucky we've got triple glazing. Well, then why are you complaining, then?
Yeah, I think there are too many...
Come on, you'd rather that than they were just indoors all day, surely.
I think there are too many curmudgeonly no ball game signs in this country. I want to rip them all down. I think people should be playing on the streets more. But they should also be picking up their own litter. I mean, the litter that I see on the streets is absolutely... I've now become that person who I will cross the street to pick up a bit of litter, because it's always very near a bin.
I also told some kids to pick up their litter, and they did.
Good.
So I'm winning on that front.
You're becoming an interventionist when it comes to this stuff.
Well, it was my local community, and I'm proud of my local community, and I don't want it to look like a dump.
Yeah.
More so than it currently does.
I sort of think we should play the national anthem behind that. That was rousing.
God's sake. We'll save that for another day. That happens in the morning, doesn't it?
It does have, absolutely, at, 5:59 every morning. But this is Good Afternoon Britain. Don't go anywhere. There's so much more to talk about, including our incredible U-turning Prime Minister. That after this.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. You may have heard the heat is returning, but only for some, particularly across southern areas through this weekend. Should be a fair bit of sunshine around, but it will stay on the cool side across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet day in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland today because of these weather fronts. Quite a few isobars on the chart. It's quite breezy, but fine and sunny for much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Staying wet, though, over Cumbria, western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing rain on and off through the day. And as I mentioned, it is quite breezy. Quite warm, though, this afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 25, 26, maybe 27 Celsius. It is a little cooler further north and obviously not feeling very pleasant with the wind and the rain, which will persist over western Scotland, particularly the Highlands and the Western Isles through much of the night. It's not much of that rain getting to Aberdeenshire and parts of the Northern Isles, just turning a little showery here later on. The west of Northern Ireland seeing some outbreaks of rain, but further east turning a little drier this evening. Rain on and off across Cumbria and the hills and mountains of Wales too, but at low levels many places won't see much rain at all, but it will always stay cloudiest in the west. A fine summer's evening across much of the east, although it will be quite breezy. Now, as we go through the night, we won't see a great deal of change. Rain and drizzle over western hills and coasts, many other areas staying dry. It will be a warm night, though. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens in most towns and cities, and that is going to lead into a pretty humid feeling weekend. A cloudy start, murky start, but it should get brighter. Certainly a brighter day to come tomorrow across much of northern Scotland. Northern Ireland cheering up along with central Scotland. Staying fairly cloudy over the far north of England. Rain and drizzle on and off across Cumbria and northwest Wales. But further south, as the sun pops out, the temperature's really jumping up over 30 degrees Celsius and getting hotter for Sunday. Bye for now.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£54,321 in totally tax-free cash could make your year the best yet. How would you react if you got that winning call?
Oh my God, I'm going to cry. Oh my God. Thank you.
You weren't expecting to get that call today, were you?
No, I wasn't.
For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our viewers and listeners. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
For GB News to win at the Trick Awards for the 3rd year in a row. So thank you so much for voting for us.
First, and hopefully there'll be a few more to come down the line.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's because of you that we're proud to be the People's Channel. It's because of you that we are Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer says he deeply regrets his Island of Strangers immigration speech, saying, "I wouldn't have used those words if I had known they were, or even would be interpreted as, an echo of Enoch Powell."
And that's not the only government U-turn of today, is it? The Prime Minister is left scarred and rudderless as he agrees existing disability claimants can actually keep their benefits, costing £3 billion to the taxpayer.
Elsewhere, it's a migrant swap. Yes, Britain and France are negotiating a new deal to exchange Channel migrants for asylum seekers in a one-in, one-out policy. But will this one-in, one-out stop the boats?
And Marcus Monzo will be sentenced later today for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute samurai sword rampage in Hainault.
Well, after a morning of emotional victim impact statements, the judge, Mr. Justice Bonathan, is just about to begin sentencing Marcus Monzo.
And in a GB News exclusive, Blackout Britain. The country could face 2-week power outages as a result of our dash towards net zero.
And is it okay to flaunt your wealth in all its tackiness and excess? Jeff Bezos has taken over Venice for his £20 million wedding to Lauren Sanchez. And of course, some of the locals aren't happy, but is it fair play?
It's extraordinary. Today, we've not only had a U-turn on disability benefits,
we have,
but also a U-turn on the words that the Prime Minister chooses to use about migration.
U-turns on words just wind me up. Just stick to what you said. It was written in a speech. It was written in a speech. It's not like it was an off-the-cuff remark that he made in a really long interview when the interviewer was pressing him and pressing him and pressing him. No, it was written down, it was thought about, it was to try to appeal to a bunch of voters that perhaps he was worried he wasn't appealing to before. And now, speaks to The Observer, his mate at The Observer, and he's suddenly, oh no, that sounded a bit racist, I terribly regret it, but it wasn't my fault anyway, because even my speechwriter didn't know it had anything to do with Enoch Powell.
Well, I completely believe, actually, I know a lot of people disagree with me on this. I completely believe Keir Starmer when he says, I didn't know it was anything to do with Enoch Powell. I mean, I've read a few Enoch Powell speeches. It didn't jump out to me.
Oh, have you now, Tom?
Didn't jump out to me when he said it.
Not sure you didn't reveal that. You might be hung, strung and quartered.
I think it's quite proper and right to read historically important speeches.
Of course it is.
But I think here's the crazy thing, right? One person on Twitter.com says, oh, this sounds like this thing. They've probably gone through and searched to try and find it and make it sound like something that... Because Enoch Powell never said island of strangers. He used the word strangers in a speech. I mean,
he said something vaguely similar. Vaguely similar.
I mean, you'd have to really try to sort of to make it sound like Keir Starmer was quoting this guy. And yet, everyone's taken it as, oh, it was an Enoch Powell speech, hook, line and sinker.
Well,
I mean,
let's be frank, I think Kevin Foster, who we spoke to a little earlier, the former immigration minister, was spot on. He knew what he was saying. Saying it for a political reason. He was. The whole speech was written for a political reason, to try and appeal to the types of people who might vote reform and think that he's a bit wet when it comes to immigration. And it's backfired massively. Now he's lost both sides. So there you go. gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch. Sorry, were you about to say something else?
No, I was about to say I completely agree with that.
OK, perfect. Well, that's good, isn't it? Let's get to the headlines.
Very good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock. These are your latest headlines. The Prime Minister has bowed to pressure from Labour rebels with major concessions announced on the welfare reform. Current recipients of PIP and universal credit with health conditions will now keep their payment in a move described by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values.
The government's been really listening to Labour MPs and is going to protect people who are currently in receipt of personal independent payments so that it won't decrease. And also people who receive the health element of universal credit, that will also be protected. So, you know, in line with Labour values, it's about protecting the most vulnerable. But I would say all of us want to see people in work who can be in work and want to work. And we're very committed to this bill, which promotes movement into work. But these changes are really critical to protecting the most vulnerable.
Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall confirmed the changes in a letter to MPs following days of crisis talks. She's now optimistic that the bill will pass on Tuesday.
I really believe these are positive changes. We've worked hard to get agreement on this. There's really, really strong commitment to the principles of reforming our welfare state. Those who can work should get help, and we have the biggest ever investment into employment support for sick and disabled people, but also to protect those who can never work, make sure their incomes are protected and make sure they're never reassessed again.
No time for fear. That's how Inspector Malloy Campbell described the moment he ran towards a sword-wielding attacker in a desperate bid to save lives. Sentencing for Marcus Monzo will start imminently for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Angerin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault. The dual Spanish-Brazilian national has also been convicted of attempted murder, GBH, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon. Officers say more lives would have been lost if the police hadn't acted when they did. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of terrorism after planes were vandalised at RAF Brize Norton. It follows an incursion claimed by Palestine Action, the protest group which is about to be banned by the Home Secretary. Counter-terror police say 2 men and a woman were detained after last week's attack, which saw red paint sprayed into a jet engine of a military aircraft. A fourth person, a 41-year-old woman, was also arrested for assisting an offender. Supporting the group will soon become a criminal offence punishable by up to 14 years in prison. Habiba Massoum has been found guilty of murdering his wife by stabbing her to death as she pushed their baby in a pram. Convicted earlier this morning at Bradford Crown Court, the 26-year-old was described as a violent, jealous and controlling husband who murdered his wife after tracking her to a women's refuge. Massoum launched the ferocious knife attack in broad daylight before leaving her to bleed to death. He then calmly walked away, leaving their 7-month-old son left behind. And in a major shift, France has agreed to take back some Channel migrants under a new one-in, one-out pilot scheme with the UK. Under the plan, for every illegal migrant arriving in Britain, one will be returned to France within a matter of weeks. It's the first deal of its kind, aimed at stopping repeat crossings and hitting people smuggling gangs. The Home Secretary is expected to unveil the policy next week ahead of the President Macron's state visit to London.
It's going to actually increase the number of people crossing the Channel, and it's going to be sort of weird merry-go-round in the middle of the English Channel as we have people coming on one side and then shifting them back just for others to come on the reverse again. It's completely ridiculous. What we should have is a proper deterrent, like we had with the Rwanda scheme, which said if you come here illegally, you do not get to stay in the UK.
That was, of course, Shadow Paymaster General Richard Holden speaking to GB News earlier on. Now, a major search is underway for a missing 13-year-old boy who's feared to have vanished near the River Tess. Milo Capilla was last seen around 9 p.m. on Thursday night in an area known locally as the Muddies. Emergency services, including police, fire crews and mountain rescue teams, have been scoring the riverside through the night, with the police helicopter still circling overhead. Officers are urging the public not to enter the water and to speak to the police on the ground if they want to help. And the iconic Glastonbury Festival is back and in full swing with a star-studded lineup this weekend. Rod Stewart takes the Legends slot, while the 1975, Neil Young and the Chrome Hearts and Olivia Rodrigo all headline on the Pyramid stage. Meanwhile, the BBC has confirmed it will not show Neil Young's headline set at the artist's request. But festival-goers will need to keep their wits about them this weekend as a second amber heat health alert has been issued for southern and eastern England. Temperatures are expected to pass 30 degrees from today, lasting through until Tuesday, with health officials urging caution as the heatwave continues. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back in just under half an hour, but first let's check in with the markets.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.373 and €1.172. The price of gold is £2,386.30 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,787 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, Marcus Monzo is due to be sentenced imminently for the murder of 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin during a horrific 20-minute rampage in Hainault.
Yes, and the convictions are attempted murder, GBH, aggravated burglary and carrying an offensive weapon.
Well, joining us now is our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's been following this trial, and indeed the sentencing is starting now.
Yeah, Mr Justice Bonathan is beginning that sentencing. Normally what you get in the sentencing is effectively the judge will outline the case in brief, and, you know, given it would have been a 3-week trial, he'll outline the key aspects of the case. Then he'll again touch on the very emotional victim impact statements that we heard this morning that were read out, some by those victims, others on behalf of the victims of Marcus Monzo's rampage. Then we get the process where the judge will see what options are open to him in terms of the sentence that he can impose, and, you know, whether he can take something off or add something to for aggravating or mitigating factors, and then he'll get to the point where he'll actually be sentenced. So I don't know if we want to listen into this at all for a couple of minutes, but he's actually outlining the case at the moment.
By your attacking the vehicle. Then police officers arrived. Showing notable courage, police constables Cameron King and Samya Mia tried to force you away so they could get to Daniel to offer such treatment as they could, only to be faced by you shouting and threatening them. Police Constable Yasmin Metcham Whitfield arrived. She was the first officer on the scene equipped with a taser. So, totally fearlessly, she led the charge to try to apprehend you. You turned in the mouth of an alleyway and delivered 3 or 4 savage blows of the sword, inflicting a chopping wound to her head of such force it caused a compound skull fracture, a deep chopping wound to her left arm, which could have caused fatal bleeding, and a chopping wound to her left wrist, which caused a complete division of the nerves and serious muscle damage. At that point, Police Constable King, despite being without a taser, placed himself between her and you, probably saving her life. Your next victims were Cindy Arias and Henry de los Rios Polania. They were in bed with their young child asleep nearby. You erupted into their bedroom, shouting about God and jabbing the sword at Mr. de los Rios Polania. Then aimed a sweeping blow at Ms. Arias' neck. She was saved from very serious injury or worse by Mr. de los Rios Polania grabbing the blade, causing a deep slash wound across the fingers of his right hand. By now, many police officers had arrived. You became cornered in a garage area, and Inspector Malloy Campbell, showing great bravery and leadership, tried to disarm or subdue you with his baton, only to be caught by a powerful swing of your sword, leaving him with a deep chopping wound to his right hand. Soon afterwards, you were stopped and detained by a number of police officers using tasers that finally brought you under control. All the police officers I have named behaved with exemplary courage and put their lives on the line to try to protect the public they serve. No doubt other officers at the scene did the same. They are all a credit to the uniform they wear, and both the Metropolitan Police and London can be proud of them. I've read and heard evidence from the victims of your offences, turning first to the injured and traumatised. Mr. Awuli still suffers with both physical and mental pain, experiencing flashbacks and being unable to sleep. Police Constable Metcham Whitfield has been left with very severe injuries and deep trauma. A series of operations have not fully restored her use of her left arm, and she has listed in her statement the numerous ways her life has become poorer and the pleasures she is no longer able to enjoy. Ms. Arias wrote she's been left with constant anxiety, stress, sleepless nights, and deep, persistent fear. Mr. de los Rios Polania states that over a year on, he is still waiting for further surgery on his hand. He suffered anxiety and panic attacks and is unable to return to work. Inspector Campbell gave evidence. He described numerous trips to hospital, pain, and only gradually recovering some of the use and movement of his hand. He is concerned his wife has had to bear the burden of looking after their child and him. He stressed his determination that he and his officers will continue to respond to whatever cause duty requires. Dr. Angelin, Daniel's father, made a witness statement. It is a hard read, so heartbreaking are its contents. Daniel was a clever boy. He was gifted musically and played a variety of sports well. He was a happy child, and his loss is obviously devastating to his parents and his brother and sister and his grandparents. I should also pay tribute to the calm, dignified manner in which Dr. Anjurin has witnessed the entire trial, with a composure that most of us would find impossible. I am very conscious no sentence I pass can even begin to temper Daniel's family's grief. There are a number of technical matters with which I need to deal. I'll make deprivation orders for the drugs and the 3 weapons seized under Section 153 of the Sentencing Act 2020. The surcharge applies in the correct amount. You pleaded guilty to counts 8 and 9, so in the circumstance of this case, I will impose sentences reduced by a quarter for those 2 offences. The sentences I pass for the offences other than murder will be determinate sentences to be served concurrent to the life sentence. 2 consequences flow from that. First, there is no problem of what the courts call totality, as none of the various determinate sentences are added one to another. Second, to ensure the offences other than murder are reflected in your actual effective sentence, I need to increase the minimum term I impose for murder to reflect the most serious of the other crimes. The days you have served until now have to be deducted from your minimum term, and I proceed on the basis that the slightly larger of the 2 figures being put forward, 421 days, is correct. I add, I've read your letter given to me today, and within its eccentric terms is a degree of remorse. I need to consider the state you were in when you committed these offences. You were clearly psychotic. I have had the advantage of hearing you give evidence and hearing the expert evidence of 2 eminent psychiatrists. I make the following findings applying the criminal standard of proof. You had traits of a schizotypal disorder that played some part in you becoming psychotic. Your choosing to consume cannabis over the months and days leading up to the 30th of April last year was the dominant cause of your state that day. You had no reason to believe that cannabis would lead you to commit violent offences, still less the murderous ones of which you've been convicted. But you had some warning of its adverse effect on you. You knew it made you paranoid and could lead at least to panic attacks. The law states, perhaps as a matter of public policy, that the voluntary consumption of drugs cannot found the partial defence of diminished responsibility. The question for me in your case is whether I can treat your psychotic state caused in large part by the voluntary taking of drugs as mitigation for the offence of murder. In my view, I can, to a limited extent, given 1, the listed aggravating factors in Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020 do not, in contrast to other guidelines, include the offence being committed under the influence of drink or drugs. 2, the listed mitigating factors in the same schedule allow in terms for any mental disorder that falls outside the defence of diminished responsibility. 3, the Sentencing Council guideline on sentencing defendants with mental disorders, particularly at paragraph 15, has the clearest implication that a state of self-induced intoxication where the accused was not aware of the possible consequences can be mitigation. That is complicated in your case, given my finding of some awareness. 4, in my view, the necessary public interest in not letting offenders hide behind drugs they choose to consume is addressed on the facts of your case by the consequent rejection of the partial defence of diminished responsibility. On those grounds, I will reduce the minimum term I pass on you for the offence of murder. The position is less clear as regards other offences, as the relevant Sentencing Council guidance for them does list the influence of drugs as an aggravating factor, so that balances out some of the mitigation afforded by your psychotic state. The only other mitigation is your previous good character. That is limited by your consumption of a variety of unlawful drugs over the years, but you have no convictions for violence. I will therefore make a reduction for that to each sentence. I have considered the Sentencing Council guideline for all the offences other than murder. For all these sentences, I will reduce the term you would otherwise have received by 10% or slightly more to allow for your previous good character and the fact you were psychotic at the time of offending. Those offences will all be concurrent to the term of life imprisonment, but nonetheless I need to specify what each will be. For these counts, I sentence you as follows. Count 1, the attempted murder of Donato Owuli. Category B2, as you took the sword to the scene, which leads to a starting point of 28 years. I reduce that to take account of the mitigation to a sentence of 25 years imprisonment. Count 3, the attempted murder of Yasmin Mechen Whitfield. Category 1A, to reflect both her serious and lasting injuries and the fact she was a serving police officer. That leads to a starting point of 35 years, which I reduce to the sentence I impose of 31 years. Category 4, aggravated burglary, category B1. That leads to a starting point of 8 years, which I reduce to a sentence of 7 years. Count 5, the attempted murder of Cindy Arias. Category B3, which leads to a starting point of 20 years, but the attack was in her own home in front of her child. So I increase the figure before mitigation to 24 years, which I reduce to the sentence I pass of 21 years for the mitigation. Count 6, the wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm of Henry de los Rios Polania. Category A3, which leads to a starting point of 5 years, but here again the attack in his own home in front of the child, which increases that figure before mitigation to 8 years, so the sentence I pass is reduced to 7 years for the mitigation. Count 7, the wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm of Malloy Campbell. Culpability A, harm between Category 2 and Category 3. This would lead to a sentence of about 6 years, but this crime has the profound aggravation of being an attack upon a serving police officer. So I would increase that sentence to 9 years before reducing it for mitigation to one of 8 years imprisonment. Counts 8 and 9, possession of 2 swords, category A1, which leads to a starting point of 18 months, which I reduce to 16 months for the mitigation, then by a quarter for the guilty pleas, to a sentence of 12 months for each of count 8 and count 9. Count 10, possession of a bladed article in a public place. Culpability A, as it is a bladed article, but I do not think you had it there as a weapon, but as part of your psychotic, half-planned later consumption of your cat. So I take harm category 2. This leads to a starting point of 6 months, which I reduce to 5 months imprisonment because of the mitigation. The life sentence I must impose for the murder of Daniel Angerin will also have a minimum term that you must serve before the parole board can consider whether it's safe to release you on licence. They may decide that time will never come in your case. Nonetheless, I have to consider and impose that minimum term. In my view, the proper approach in your case is to first take the term I would impose were I only dealing with the murder of Daniel. In that case, I would take the starting point in Schedule 21 for a murder when a weapon has been taken to the scene of the crime of 25 years, then increase that term to 30 years because the victim in this case was a child. The two issues I have had to grapple with are how much should I increase the minimum term to address the other offending, and how much should I then reduce that term to reflect the mitigation of previous good character and, above all, your psychotic state on the day. I have asked myself what minimum term would I have imposed on someone who had committed all these offences when they were in their right mind. The sort of figure I would have arrived at to reflect 3 attempted murders and 2 woundings with intent with 2 police officer victims would lead to a term of perhaps 50 years. Though in fact I would probably instead have regard to paragraph 8 of the schedule and conclude the mass of aggravation of the other offences would lead to a whole life order. On the basis that a person who had committed all the dreadful offences of the 30th of April last year would attract a minimum term of the order of 50 years, I reduce the term I impose on you by a fifth to recognise your mental ill health and previous good character to 40 years. From that, I have to deduct the number of days already served. Therefore, the sentence I pass for count 2, the murder of Daniel Anjurin, is life imprisonment with a minimum term of 38 years and 309 days. Mr. Monzo can go now. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, there we have it. 38 years and 309 days, the minimum term of this life imprisonment.
OK, well, Mark White is here with us to tell us more. Mark, we just heard the sentence.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting listening to the trial judge there when he's talking through the sentencing options that are available to him. It almost seems very mechanical and quite cold and detached, but it's an important part of open justice where, for the public, it's explained to them why he's reaching the sentencing decisions that he has. And effectively, what he has reached a decision on is a sentence that will be the best part of 39 years behind bars before this man, Marcus Monzo, can be considered for release. Doesn't mean that at that point he will be released, but he can at least be considered for parole at that point. And you heard the judge there really outlining this very, very traumatic and harrowing case that unfolded in Hainault in North East London on the 30th of April last year. And hopefully we can bring you some images of Marcus Monzo on that day where, first of all, he was posing with his samurai sword with his cat that he later went on to kill and to skin. Just absolutely horrific. But the judge saying, of course, that he was psychotic at the time through very heavy cannabis use. And this is in Hainault during that 20-minute rampage when the police arrived. Police officers attacked as well. One of those officers who was attacked was PC Yasmin Metcham-Whitfield, who pushed forward to try to arrest this man because she was armed with a taser, unlike other officers. That will, without doubt, lead to, I'm sure, calls again within the Police Federation to have tasers routinely available to all those officers who want to carry them just for this kind of eventuality. It was interesting listening to a victim impact statement from PC Metcham-Whitfield. She said, "I find this emotionally devastating. Every morning as I try to cover the scar and dent on the left side of my head, I no longer want to travel by myself, to go out of the house without someone being with me. I have a fear of being attacked again and not being able to defend myself." And you remember the judge there just stipulating the injuries she suffered, that a blow to the head that was so severe that it didn't just cause a deep laceration on her head, it also caused a compact fracture of her skull, as well as a very significant injury to her arm and to her hand as well. We've been hearing from her inspector, Inspector Malloy Campbell, who was rushing to the scene to offer assistance as well. And he has told the media of the messages that he was getting over the police radio as they're racing to the scene. And he's hearing about PC Metcham-Whitfield being severely injured. Just listen to what the inspector says.
As we were heading to the incident, my sergeant was driving and I was in the operator's seat, and as we heard that transmission, police officer stabbed, I think I turned to him and said, "Just get us there. Don't speed up, don't let red mist get to you. We need to get there and get control of this incident." And that's the only thing. You need to switch back into the basics of being a police officer on the ground, which is the preservation of life. And that's it. And so that's the only thing I was thinking of, the need to preserve life. And that includes the police officers on the ground.
And one of the calculations that Inspector Campbell was making was the fact that there was no armed police officers on scene, nor would they reach the scene for another 10 to 15 minutes. So he really had to decide what would be their next step. This is what he told the media.
And so, yeah, it was just a case of doing what I thought needed to be done. It was a decision. Do we contain the defendant or do we confront? And that was a decision that needed to be made quickly. And obviously the decision was to confront, because I felt that had we done anything else, then more members of the public and potentially police officers would have been seriously injured or worse.
So a very brave man, along with fellow officers who confronted this samurai sword-wielding attacker. We also heard some really emotional victim impact statements from Dr. Ebenezer Ajuran, the father of Daniel Ajuran, the 14-year-old boy who was killed by this man. He spoke of running out when he was told by Daniel's brother that he'd been stabbed, to find his son slumped over on the roadway. He said when he approached him, he realised that he was dead, that there was nothing he could do for him except just cradle him in his hands, in his arms, as he waited for the paramedics to arrive.
Absolutely horrific. So that sentence, minimum of 40 years. Thank you very much indeed, Mark White, for bringing us that. Well, we're going to get to the bulletins and then we'll be straight back with you.
Good afternoon. The headlines just after 2:30. Breaking in the last few minutes, Marcus Monzo has been sentenced this afternoon with life imprisonment with a minimum of 40 years for the murder of Daniel Ajuran in a 20-minute rampage in Hainault. Prime Minister has made major welfare concessions, allowing current PIP and universal credit claimants with health conditions to keep their payments, a move praised by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values. 29-year-old woman and two men aged 36 and 24 have been arrested on suspicion of a terror offence after two aircraft were damaged at RAF Bryce Norton in an action claimed by campaign group Palestine Action. And Britain could face power blackouts lasting up to 2 weeks. Reports saying that's because the drive to net zero hasn't accounted for the country's unpredictable weather. And Glastonbury Festival is in full flow, with the likes of 1975, Neil Young and Olivia Rodrigo all performing this weekend. But festival goers will have to take care as the hot weather continues, with highs of over 30 degrees expected. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. You may have heard the heat is returning, but only for some, particularly across southern areas through this weekend. Should be a fair bit of sunshine around, but it will stay on the cool side across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet day in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland today because of these weather fronts. Quite a few isobars on the chart. It's quite breezy, but fine and sunny for much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Staying wet, though, over Cumbria, western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing rain on and off through the day. And as I mentioned, it is quite breezy. Quite warm, though, this afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 25, 26, maybe 27 Celsius. It is a little cooler further north and obviously not feeling very pleasant with the wind and the rain, which will persist over western Scotland, particularly the Highlands and the Western Isles through much of the night. It's not much of that rain getting to Aberdeenshire and parts of the Northern Isles, just turning a little showery here later on. The west of Northern Ireland seeing some outbreaks of rain, but further east turning a little drier this evening. Rain on and off across Cumbria and the hills and mountains of Wales too, but at low levels many places won't see much rain at all, but it will always stay cloudiest in the west. A fine summer's evening across much of the east, although it will be quite breezy. Now, as we go through the night, we won't see a great deal of change. Rain and drizzle over western hills and coasts, many other areas staying dry. It will be a warm night, though. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens in most towns and cities, and that is going to lead into a pretty humid feeling weekend. A cloudy start, murky start, but it should get brighter. Certainly a brighter day to come tomorrow across much of northern Scotland. Northern Ireland cheering up along with central Scotland. Staying fairly cloudy over the far north of England. Rain and drizzle on and off across Cumbria and northwest Wales. But further south, as the sun pops out, the temperature's really jumping up over 30 degrees Celsius and getting hotter for Sunday. Bye for now.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. On the M74 northbound between junctions 13 and 12, a road incident is causing 12-minute delays. Caution is advised. An accident affects M4 eastbound lanes between junctions 45 at Innisforgan and 44 at Lonlass. The A50 eastbound is congested with 20-minute delays. On the A1 northbound in Lincolnshire, a collision has closed lanes, adding 10 minutes to travel time. The A30 in Cornwall is closed due to an accident, and on the trains, major disruption is reported between London Euston and Milton Keynes Central. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 36 minutes past 2, now 37 minutes past. We have been listening to the sentencing of Marcus Monzo, the attacker in the Hainault attack last year that took the lives of, well, in particular, one little boy.
Yes, indeed. Let's go cross live outside the court because there is due to be a statement. We're just watching here outside the court of the Old Bailey where this attacker sentenced. We could be hearing from the family. We may also hear from others too. Mark, these sorts of things, it takes a little moment or two, doesn't it, for this for a conference like this to begin. But a very long sentence has been passed.
Yeah, I mean, these are always very emotional moments for the family and actually for the investigating officers and prosecutors who put a case like this together as well, because it has been, you know, a great deal of time and emotion invested in trying to get a successful prosecution like this. And for the families, it goes without saying just how absolutely horrific and traumatic it was for them. We heard from Dr. Ebenezer Anjurin, the father of Daniel Anjurin, who was murdered by Marcus Monzo, about the gaping hole that this has left in their family, the fact that they will never get to see this amazing young man grow up and become the amazing adult that he was destined to be, never see him get married or have children. He was such an academically talented young man, we're told, who played the violin and who played the piano. He was really, according to all those who knew him, the most amazing character, who was dressed in his sports kit that day as he was going off for an ordinary day at school, expecting to be playing sport alongside his mates at school as well, when he was just, you know, approached and attacked so absolutely horrifically by Marcus Monzo. Marcus Monzo, who was psychotic at that point, having taken cannabis, very heavy doses of cannabis over a long period of time. And actually, Daniel Anjurin wasn't Marcus Monzo's first victim. It was another man, Donata Iwuli, who was there at the time. He's a delivery driver who was in that crescent, in that residential street, when Marcus Monzo, driving his van, drove into him, knocked him over, sent him flying actually off his feet and into a nearby garden. And then Marcus Monzo rushed from the van with the samurai sword in his hand and lashed out, striking Mr. Iwuli on the neck, causing him severe injuries to his neck. He had the wherewithal, having been knocked off his feet and badly injured because of that, and also, of course, then having been attacked with this samurai sword, still managed to sprint away for all his life was worth. And managed to get away from the clutches of Marcus Monzo.
Now, Mark, I should say we're seeing some activity here. I must warn everyone watching and listening that some viewers may find this content distressing. That is, of course, in relation to this most horrific attack. Might have been a false alarm right there. To remind everyone, we are awaiting a press conference here from the family affected, but also perhaps the police.
These things can take a bit of time, because what always happens after a sentence is passed, you've got family members in particular that will be very emotional, will be absorbing the sentence that has just been passed and what that means for the person who is responsible for such a horrific set of crimes. And they, along with the police and the prosecutors, will be, I'm sure, just amending their words, that they're going to say. What we're told is that the family will not be taking any questions from the media there. That doesn't mean the police or the prosecutors might not take a question or two if it's thrown at them by the assembled press. But what you have there, you don't see it, are many members of the media cameras, a bank of cameras, stills cameras and television cameras, and members of the press behind a little barrier there to just allow them, just at the bottom of the frame where our strap is where all the microphones are to capture the words. And we don't know at this stage whether it'll actually be the police that read out the words of the family, or whether, you know, a family member or a victim decide to come and say some words. Understandably, it can be just all too much, and the last thing they want to do is have to face the cameras as well. So they'll quite often stand beside the police and the prosecutors as they deliver their speeches and read out a statement on behalf.
This crime is just so horrific, like something out of a horror movie. A 20-minute rampage with a samurai sword. Quiet suburban area. Nearly decapitated this 14-year-old boy, who, as you say, has been described as a lovely boy, clever, smart, talented musically, I'm sure many other things too, a perfect little boy to his family. And he also attacked 2 police officers, 3 members of the public as well, and while doing so completely high on drugs and God knows what else.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible that it lasted as long as it did, 20 minutes, but he was running, you know, throughout the street there, throughout this residential, I don't know if it was a cul-de-sac, but certainly a small crescent, I think, of houses there, running in and out of gardens, down lanes. He went in to one house, ran into the bedroom where, you know, a mother and father were still at that point in their bed, and, you know, attacked him. He had lashed out at one of the victims, the woman in that bedroom, but actually her husband reached out, grabbed the samurai sword as it came down, and suffered a very significant injury to his hand. And at that point, there was a young child in the room who started crying, and apparently Marcus Monzo, for whatever reason, stopped his attack and left the bedroom at that point, went downstairs, and the police were arriving at that point, and it's there that they were giving chase to him. In particular, PC Yasmin Metcham Whitfield, she was the only officer of the first cohort of officers that arrived that had a taser. So she pursued Marcus Monzo down some lanes and through sort of garages, and it was down one of those lanes. She chased after him. He was hiding behind a building, and then jumped out and attacked her, smashing her over the head, as I said before, causing such injury that it fractured her skull, as well as causing a deep laceration to her head, also a deep laceration to her arm that could have actually been fatal in terms of the blood loss, a deep wound to her hand as well. So absolutely horrific. And it was one of her colleagues that stood in front of her. And at that point, Marcus Monzo ran away again as more officers were arriving at the scene.
I mean, what bravery of those two first officers, one who didn't even have a taser, one who did, running towards the man with the samurai sword.
Terrifying.
Only to be hacked and hacked again. And then for the second police officer to stand in between. I mean, these are the bravest of the brave.
Yes, and it was interesting to hear Inspector Malloy Campbell, the officer who was racing to get to the scene to assist his fellow officers in trying to bring this rampage to an end. He said that, you know, they didn't have time to think really about the consequences for themselves. It was all about the preservation of life. And do they try and contain it and then risk him breaking free again and injuring someone else, or do they try and confront him? And they decided to confront him, and of course that's why Inspector Campbell was injured very badly on the hand as well. He was off work for 3 months because of the injury there.
And Mark, a couple of people have got in touch asking about why it's a life sentence but with a minimum. There's a difference, isn't there, between a life sentence and a life tariff?
Yes, it's so. What could have been open to the judge had it been more than one victim, for instance, would be, and if there was no mitigating factors, would be a whole life tariff. So in other words, this man would never see freedom again. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But because there was one victim, even though he was a schoolboy, because there was some mitigating factors, such as the fact that this 37-year-old attacker had a previously clean record. He'd never been in trouble with the police before. And also, the judge said he was minded to take into account the psychotic state of this 37-year-old, even though that shouldn't be something that's used as a mitigating factor in a crime of causing wounding and attempted murder. He said he was minded to do that, but he didn't take much of the sentence. But it was just enough to ensure that it was a lengthy minimum term of what will effectively be 39 years behind bars before he's eligible to be considered for parole. As I say, the thing to remind ourselves about this, it doesn't mean that at 39 years from now that the parole board will say you are granted parole. They may well think that this is a man who's still not deserving of parole, because remember what we heard in terms of the judge's sentencing, and also what we heard from the father of Daniel Ajuran there talking in his victim impact statement. He said that Marcus Monzo had shown no remorse. Now, he may have been in a psychotic state then because of the vast amounts of cannabis and other drugs he was consuming, but one would assume that he is not in that psychotic state now. But according to Daniel Ajuran's father, that he said that Dr. Ebenezer Ajuran said that this man had shown no remorse for taking away the life of his 14-year-old son in such a horrific, brutal manner.
And Marcus Monzo was a man who travelled the world trying to obtain this peculiar cocktail of drugs to feed his particularly gruesome ambition that was connected to some sort of peculiar interpretation of spirituality and religion. And he kept asking all of his victims, do you believe in God? Before he struck them with his sword. I mean, this stuff is just so hard to understand in terms of this man was clearly disturbed, but also, strangely, clearly he had intent, because he sought those drugs in the first place that then may well have contributed to some of these mitigating factors. I mean, this was something that he had planned out as a sort of quasi-religious rampage.
Yes, and the judge said, as he was considering mitigating factors, the fact that he, you know, had suffered psychosis because of the drugs he was taking could be seen as a small mitigating factor. But the fact that he'd sought out drugs in the first place is an aggravating factor, and he would have been aware, the judge said, about the potential effects of cannabis, the psychosis that can be caused by cannabis and a combination of other drugs, vast amounts of cannabis and the like. And I think this does ignite the debate as well around cannabis, where you have, for instance, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, believing that, you know, we should be going down a road of perhaps decriminalising, not necessarily legalising, but decriminalising small amounts of cannabis. Well, those in law enforcement will tell you that, you know, small amounts of cannabis often lead to larger amounts of cannabis. Cannabis in itself can have that effect of psychosis, especially stronger and stronger sort of brands of cannabis that drug dealers are pushing out there. And they will also say that cannabis use is one of the biggest factors behind the very significant rise in violent crime in London and other centres of population in the UK, because it is the most profitable of drugs for the drug dealers. And what you will often find is much of the violence that's meted out is between rival drug gangs fighting for a share of the profits over cannabis. So it's not as simple as just thinking cannabis isn't that harmful, it's a small amount of cannabis. It can have unintended consequences and intended consequences.
Although this attacker was not on small amounts of cannabis. I mean, he, as we were discussing, travelled the world to find the most extreme, potent and peculiar forms of drugs, not just cannabis, but others, opiates as well.
100%, but he never started, did he, on large amounts of cannabis? He will, like everybody else, have started on a small amount of cannabis, and his habit will have grown from then. That's the point that many who do not advocate the decriminalisation of cannabis point to. The fact that you can start out believing that you may be in control of a certain drug and that you are not going to get into a sort of habit-forming use of a drug like cannabis, but it can overtake you and you can become very dependent on certain types of drugs.
And yet clearly this happened within the structure of the system that exists in this country as things stand. The illegal drug gangs pushing that more potent cannabis. I suppose some might argue that were it a legal regulated dispensary, you wouldn't be pushed the harder stuff.
Except everybody that I speak to in law enforcement tell me that if you did that, it wouldn't actually solve the problem, because you would still have the criminal gangs trying to make a profit, and all they would do is seek tougher, more potent strains of cannabis to then sell, and they would undercut what is being sold in the dispensaries anyway. So you wouldn't really solve the problem. It would still be there. There would still be a black market that would be very popular with people who seek a greater and greater high.
Although to some extent, streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music, stay with me here, have undermined the illegal downloading music markets just because it's more convenient, because people are willing to pay a small fee to get the music legitimately, whereas 20 years ago they might have all been, you know, doing the illegal Pirate Bay sites and all the rest of it. But it's the same principle, that even though you can still get something that is cheaper or free or more potent or more
One
strong,
is addictive and
you're
one
going
isn't.
to go for the easy route and you're going to go for the easy option. I think there is some evidence in the United States to suggest that areas where you have more liberal regimes on this, you do see a reduction in that gang crime.
Yeah, I see different evidence when I look at the situation in the United States, and I see particular jurisdictions in the likes of LA, for instance, where they have much more liberal laws around the use of cannabis and other drugs, that actually it's not really led to a reduction. It's still suffering from a very significant problem with drugs gangs out there still fighting for their share of the market in whatever form that particular illicit substance might be. But as I say, here we go. We diverged slightly.
We certainly did.
So we are just to remind our audience waiting for a statement that we believe will either be read out on behalf of, or perhaps be read out by, a family member of the victims caught up in this terrible murder and attempted murder and attack that took place on the 30th of August last year. And we will hear from those police officers from the Metropolitan Police and the Crown Prosecution Service, who of course put this case together, who have a lot invested in this, who will have, you know, from the point of view of both the prosecutors and the police, formed very close bonds, as they always do in these big cases, with the victims and their families. So it will be emotional for them as well. And it will be interesting to get the reaction that they have to the sentence that has been passed. A lengthy sentence, but perhaps, I'm sure for many, and maybe even the families, they're not long enough.
Yeah.
Is it ever long enough if there's any prospect of this man being released again? He'll be in his 70s at the time when he's eligible for parole.
Well, that's always the question, isn't it? When we see murderers sentenced and not given a whole life tariff, when there is that possibility that they will be able to face parole and be out before they die. Of course, he'll be an elderly gentleman at that point. So it may well be that he never sees freedom again,
And
regardless.
to repeat, it's 38 years and 309 days. I think that makes him 76 by the time he's eligible for parole. But as you were saying, Mark, he might not necessarily be granted parole. It doesn't mean he's out in just under 39 years. It could indeed mean that he does stay there. Now, we should just recap. We are waiting for this press conference from the families who, no doubt, behind that door are steeling themselves, preparing themselves for what will be a very difficult statement to read, or indeed to have read out for them.
Absolutely. So there we are outside the Old Bailey. We're going to bring you that press conference. We've run to the end of our show now. Good afternoon, Britain. But we'll be passing over to Martin Daubney and, of course, the capable hands of Mark White, our Home and Security editor. But that man, Marcus Monzo, that killer, sentenced to a minimum of 40 years in prison. We're going to hand over to Martin Daubney. Take a quick break first.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. You may have heard the heat is returning, but only for some, particularly across southern areas through this weekend. Should be a fair bit of sunshine around, but it will stay on the cool side across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet day in parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland today because of these weather fronts. Quite a few isobars on the chart. It's quite breezy, but fine and sunny for much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Staying wet, though, over Cumbria, western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing rain on and off through the day. And as I mentioned, it is quite breezy. Quite warm, though, this afternoon over the Midlands and eastern England, 25, 26, maybe 27 Celsius. It is a little cooler further north and obviously not feeling very pleasant with the wind and the rain, which will persist over western Scotland, particularly the Highlands and the Western Isles through much of the night. It's not much of that rain getting to Aberdeenshire and parts of the Northern Isles, just turning a little showery here later on. The west of Northern Ireland seeing some outbreaks of rain, but further east turning a little drier this evening. Rain on and off across Cumbria and the hills and mountains of Wales too, but at low levels many places won't see much rain at all, but it will always stay cloudiest in the west. A fine summer's evening across much of the east, although it will be quite breezy. Now, as we go through the night, we won't see a great deal of change. Rain and drizzle over western hills and coasts, many other areas staying dry. It will be a warm night, though. Temperatures holding up in the mid to high teens in most towns and cities, and that is going to lead into a pretty humid feeling weekend. A cloudy start, murky start, but it should get brighter. Certainly a brighter day to come tomorrow across much of northern Scotland. Northern Ireland cheering up along with central Scotland. Staying fairly cloudy over the far north of England. Rain and drizzle on and off across Cumbria and northwest Wales. But further south, as the sun pops out, the temperature's really jumping up over 30 degrees Celsius and getting hotter for Sunday. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and a happy Friday. Welcome to the Martin Dalby Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Breaking news, the Hainault sword attack. Marcus Monzo has been sentenced for at least 40 years for murder after killing a schoolboy in North East London. We'll be hearing from the victim's family shortly at a police press conference. And as Keir Starmer caves in to 120 Labour benefit rebels, it marks the under fire PM's third U-turn in a month. After also backtracking on the winter fuel allowance cuts and being forced into a rape gang inquiry that Labour voted against, is Keir Starmer on the brink? And could we even see a dramatic early general election? Labour is planning a one-in, one-out immigration plan with France, where for every illegal immigrant we deport back to France, we must accept an asylum seeker from them in return. I'll be joined by border control experts to ask them, shouldn't it be non-in and all-out? Beep on. And a one-legged cricketer is feeling stumped after he had his disability benefit stopped for not being disabled enough. I'll be joined in the studio by Sean Rigby, who lost his leg aged 2, to see what he thinks of their decision to bowl out his benefits claim. Apologies there for the frog in my throat. We have another horrendous murder in Britain committed with a bladed weapon and with a psychopath under the influence of drugs. 40 years minimum term before parole. Some may say was a fitting sentence. Some may say it simply wasn't stern enough. And with echoes of the Valdo Calicain case, of course, one close to my heart. 2 weeks ago today, I walked with the victims' families in Nottingham. Have we learned nothing? As another child dies on the streets, his father cradling him as he slips away, unbearable loss for the family, and yet huge bravery from our police force. The whole conversation, though, that will start about weapons, about drugs, about sentencing. It feels like Groundhog Day, and shortly we'll be going to a police press conference at the Old Bailey. And we may even hear from some of the families themselves. In the meantime, please do get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and a very good afternoon to you. Just after 3 o'clock, Sir Keir Starmer has confirmed a major climb down on his welfare reforms after a rebellion by more than 100 Labour MPs threatened to sink the bill. It's a move described by Dame Meg Hillier as a win for Labour values.
The government's been really listening to Labour MPs and is going to protect people who are currently in receipt of personal independence payments so that it won't decrease. And also people who receive the health element of universal credit, that will also be protected. So, you know, in line with Labour values, it's about protecting the most vulnerable. But I would say all of us want to see people in work who can be in work and want to work. And we're very committed to this bill, which promotes movement into work. But these changes are really critical to protecting the most vulnerable.
It's the third government U-turn in a month and a major blow to Sir Keir Starmer's authority, according to opposition parties. The move slashes up to £3 billion from the bill's expected savings, casting doubt over Chancellor Rachel Reeves' economic plans. Some rebels have welcomed the concessions, but others say they'll still vote against the bill over fears of a two-tier welfare system.